Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Western Area Planning meeting for the 11th of March 2025. I'm Councillor David Jeffries and I'm chairing today's committee meeting. To my right are the planning officers Anthony Deavy and Keith Thompson, and to my left is Jane Dale from Democratic Services, Diane Hayden, solicitor, who is also in the members of the committee and public. Arrangements for dealing with planning applications. An officer's summary and update will be given. Items involving members of the public will be dealt with first, and speakers are restricted to 3 minutes. A warning when 30 seconds remain. Speakers are not permitted to circulate additional information, including photographs, plans, or petitions. Any councillor not on the committee who has requested to speak will also be given 3 minutes. Members are to note the information given by officers and speakers. Any decision proposed which is contrary to the recommendation contained in the report will require reasons if the proposal is to refuse, and the reason and conditions if the proposal is to approve the application. In accordance with the Council's equality policy, speakers are asked to refrain from making any comments which could be construed as being discriminatory or defamatory. Otherwise, it will be necessary to intervene. Additionally, I would request that although differing views may be expressed, that people respect those differences. Please ensure your phones are switched to silent to avoid any disruption during the meeting, and also whilst you are not speaking, can you put yourself on mute if you've not already done so. Fire procedure. If the fire alarm sounds, attendees will be directed where to go. Please follow their instructions. Just one moment, please. Got a few technical problems. Right, moving on to the agenda. Agenda item number 1. Declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests, prejudicial interests, and declarations under Section 4, the Planning Code of Practice for dealing with planning applications. Members to declare any interest in items on the agenda and the nature of such interest. Yes, Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I can speak on behalf of everybody and maybe speed along proceedings if I point out that we've all received correspondence on agenda items 4, 5 and 8. From a personal point of view as well, I've also received correspondence from objectors and applicants and supporters on agenda item 11 for Medler Drive in Brough. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think that will probably go for quite a lot of us, I believe. Who else would that be including?
Sorry, Chairman, can I just, first of all, rather than speak on behalf of all the other committee members, they need to declare themselves, and you've only said that you received correspondence, so I would need to know in what capacity. So if everybody could be clear. And if you could state what the interest was. Thank you.
On this side first, work my way around. Yes, Councillor Gill.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to declare that my wife is also an East Riding councillor and she will be speaking from the audience on item 11. And also regarding item 11, this subject was discussed at a Ellerton Cumbrough Town Council meeting, of which I took no part and made no comment. I've also had correspondence from two objectors, of which I haven't replied, and subsequently have made no comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gill. Yes, Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Chair. I've received emails and correspondence from items 4 and 5 and emails from item 11. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Cottages.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the items on pages 7 and pages 41, the two items at Market Wheaton, I received an email from Councillor Hammond and Councillor West, who are the ward members, stating their objections. I didn't respond to that. And I also received an email from Councillor Dale Needham. I think that was in his capacity as a resident though, as he lives there. And I didn't respond to that one either. I also believe I received an email with regards to the item on page 144 at 3 Medler Drive, Brough. That was from an objector, but I didn't respond to that email either. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to declare a pecuniary interest in items 4 and 5 as the plans relate to build behind my property, so I will leave the chamber at that point. Item 6, I have to declare an interest. I attended a councillor ward surgery and the complainant raised the issue with us. I referred the matter to Councillor Shepherd and also have an interest in item 8, where I attended a parish council meeting at Sutton upon Derwent, where the items were discussed. I made no comment to support either side. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Healy. Was it Healy? Was it Councillor Healy wishes to speak?
Yeah, I just had an email in respect of the Medler Drive Brough from Councillor Gill. I've had no other emails because I don't think people expected me to be here. Thank you.
I do apologise, Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry, I forgot to wave a lot. Like most people, I received emails through for items number 4 and 5 and number 7. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Bob.
Thank you, Chair. I've received email correspondence from fellow councillors on items 4, 5, 8 and 11, which I have read but not responded to. I've also received paper copies of details of items 4 and 5, which I have read briefly before this meeting, but I haven't responded to. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Robs. Councillor Carey.
Yes, Chair. Agenda items 4, 5, 7 are in my parish in Market Wheaton, and item 9 is also in my ward. I've also received some correspondence from a builder, which I've not responded to. Sorry.
Which agenda item on that one? Sorry.
Sorry?
From the builder, which was the agenda item? Sorry.
Sorry, it was 4, 5, 7 and 9.
Can I just make it clear? And then you said you also received some correspondence from a builder.
Yeah.
Which item was that referring to?
That would be for 4 and 5. Thank you.
Councillor Hopton.
I think I'm on the same page here. 4 and 5, which obviously we had last month, so we had that correspondence on there. We've had an email today from the ward councillor who's not able to speak because he didn't ask to on item 8, and also on, what was the other one? 11. Also as from the ward councillor on that one. And on item 10, which is an item in my ward, I did receive an email from the resident who I've seized down as the objector today. I did speak with that resident several weeks ago at length, but I expressed no opinion whatsoever regarding the item on there. We just talked about the process, etc., involved today. So, and the lovely peacocks that live down that street, which aren't as lovely as I gather.
Yeah, I received correspondence on items 4 and 5 and 11, but I've made no response. Thank you. If all those in favour? Agenda item 3, withdrawals. Have there been any withdrawals?
No withdrawals, Chairman.
Thank you. Just before we move on to the planning agenda itself, there seems to have been some bit of lack of, well, not a lack, but a slip up in the communications regarding agenda item number 11. Councillor Colleen Gill did send an email in wishing to speak on this agenda item, and unfortunately she wasn't put on the list. So what I'm asking is for the councillors, are we happy to add Councillor Gill, Colleen Gill, to the speakers list on agenda item number 11? Any objections at all on that? No objection? Yeah, she did send an email, but it didn't come through the proper channels. But she is in attendance today to speak against this application. Are we all happy? Any comments, anybody at all on it? Right, we can add. Yes, Councillor Wilkins.
Sorry, Chairman, just to confirm, she did send an email in requesting to speak, and it's just an error that we didn't act on that.
Through the chairman, I haven't seen an email registering to speak, and normally anybody registering to speak is asked to come to me, and I registered them. I've received no such email.
Right, it's just that and forgive me, it's nothing to do with Councillor Gill or anybody else, but if we give privilege to a councillor to speak without sending an email in requesting it, then why doesn't anybody else have that right?
Totally agree. What I was just saying was the reasons given were that it went to a planner, and she thought it was going to be forwarded, and it wasn't forwarded to Jane. So so I say it's up to this committee whether you feel. Yes, Councillor Hopton.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, through you, if I may intervene. Councillor Wilkins is absolutely right. We have to be consistent. We routinely enforce the rules about registration to speak at the committee in the benefit for everybody and in the public interest. I haven't seen any evidence, and I'd be happy to defer if there is any of an email coming in to anyone to be then passed on to the committee manager. But the rule, as far as I'm concerned, is the strict rules about registration must be applied consistently in fairness to all applicants.
Right. Well, yes, Councillor Cottages.
Yeah, I agree that, again, it's nothing personal against Councillor Gill. I think she's, brilliant. But to be fair to Councillor Wilkinson, I do agree that if this was a resident, would they be afforded the same leniency? So if you can assure me that a resident, in light of this mistake, would be afforded the same leniency, then I'm happy to agree.
That's fine. Yes, Councillor Hopton.
Just on that, because it's not the same, but we've got a similar scenario today with Councillor Cousins, who's sort of misread the process as such, and has sent an email in, which I'm sort of feeling if we were to afford this to Councillor Gill, that we should probably afford the same to Councillor Cousins as well, or am I? It might be totally different, but I'm just that aspect.
Okay. Well, I think yes, Councillor Gill.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My understanding is because of a perceived change in protocol where to call an item in, we now have to fill in forms with justified planning reasons to bring something to committee. And on that form, it infers that the councillor should be attending that to speak to it. And it's some confusion internally with that perception that's caused this issue. Previously, we had to just email in to say we'd like to talk against something. This form has come along in the meantime, which we've been repeatedly told we have to do. And the interpretation of that seems to be in sync with the councillor and the council internally at the moment. And that's the reason for this.
One last one from, and then can we move on? Yes, Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Chair. All I would want you to do is consider an act of parity there with Councillor Cousins, who has actually written in to speak, but I believe was not within the time frame. So I think we need to deal with both councillors in the same fair manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, the form that Councillor Gill refers to is the member's request for something to be referred to committee. That requires members to give clear and concise material planning reasons to why an application should be debated at committee. It also says that if they call an application into committee, they should be prepared to speak. Registering to speak at committee is a separate process. That's done via committee services. The email that that's been referred to from Councillor Gill was an email sent on Monday at 6:30 in the evening saying she's not on the agenda to speak and querying why that is. So that's the email that's being referred to. The process for registering to speak is the same for a councillor as it is for a member of the public. You have to contact committee services to do that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Right, so generally the consensus is no, we will not allow Councillor Killeen Gill to speak. Right, thank you. Right, we will now move on to, it's starting off with agenda item number 10, page 113. Sorry, 133, my apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application for planning permission for the erection of a detached garage/gym to the front at number 3 Woodlands Rise in North Ferriby. The officer recommendation is approval and there are no updates to the report as printed. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 speakers on this one. We've got a Mr. W. Starr, the objector. Mr. Starr, come to the seat, please, Mr. Starr. You have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning when your time's getting near. Just press that button, that long bar at the bottom, the red light's on now, yeah.
Hello. Okay.
Yep,
right.
you're on. Thank you.
Okay. So good afternoon, members of the committee, and thank you for my opportunity to speak today. I just wanted to say Woodlands Rise is a beautiful street. I've lived there for 23 years, and in all that time, development has been limited slightly above and to the rear of the properties in order to preserve the beautiful street scene. My neighbours only moved into their property 5 months ago and submitted these plans just a few weeks later. I don't believe that they are sympathetic to the street scene. The building is well forward of the building line and there is enough room to house this exact building behind the building line adjacent to the property. It's a large building. Even the case officer has confirmed it is a large building. It's 35 feet in width, 20 feet in depth and 15 feet in height, offering over 600 feet of space, square feet of space, which is the same size as a modern bungalow. And I consider this to be inappropriate in this location and sets a dangerous precedent for future building in the street. The building has one up and over garage door with the remaining spaces taken up with glass bifold doors. So I suspect that this building will not be used for the purposes for which the approval is sought. Number 3 already has a double garage and a large driveway capable of parking 6 cars. My neighbour is proposing enlarging the hardstanding to nearly 3 times the size, eradicating most of the front lawn. Surely this will have an environmental impact. All that will be left is a massive hardstanding and a large brick building. I also believe that this hardstanding will add to the water runoff problems that we have on the Woodlands Rise. Every driveway is on a slope with the houses on the other side of the road being at a much lower level. I urge you to reject this application as my neighbours will not lose out. They can easily have this exact building behind the existing building line adjacent to the property, coupled with a smaller, more sympathetic hardstanding drive in order to preserve the beautiful street scene. However, if you're inclined to approve this today, I would kindly ask if you could visit the street first before making such an important decision on how the beautiful street scene will change. That's it. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next speaker is the applicant, Mr. J. Franz. Yeah, 3 minutes, Mr. Franz, with the 30-second warning. Thank you.
Good afternoon. In response to our plan application regarding the garage and gym, we have taken our neighbour Mr. Starr's concerns and the parish councils into consideration and propose our comments. Our proposed drawings do have the garage forward of the building line, but in our opinion, our architects, there is adequate space situated at the front of the property. The actual house plot is set back 20 metres from the front boundary, from which we have planted 116 new laurel shrubs, which will form a new hedge and also screen the front garage, in keeping with the greenery of the street scene. On our original planning application, we did apply for a brick wall with railings, but giving consideration to the actual surroundings, we have reapplied with no brick wall and just railings, which will be keeping with the existing neighbours' properties. The position of the garage is set back in the left-hand corner of the front of the plot, which is screened by mature conifer trees that are over 15 foot tall. We've also planted 36 new laurels to form a new hedge adjoining Mr. Starr's property, which will also screen the garage from our neighbour's property. The proposed driveway leading to the garage will be of standard block set construction, of which is designed to allow the filtration of any surface water through it, as Mr. Starr's concerns regarding flooding to surrounding properties, which would be very unlikely due to the new double thickness hedging at the front. We would, however, install a line of eco drainage which would collect any surface water and eradicate any flooding issues. The water would be directed into the proposed soakaway for the garage. I would just like to point out that we have lived at the property for 5 months during the winter period, and I've not seen any signs of excessive rainfall from our property to any of our neighbours. The driveway will be flanked by grass verges and green shrubbery, all in keeping with the existing street scene. The footprint of the proposed double garage is of standard UK size and is in keeping with the existing garage that is attached to the house. The additional gym area has been designed to blend in with the structure of the building. The building is of ground floor construction with no future or development to make it any larger, as mentioned in Mr. Starr's comments.
You have 30 seconds left.
The proposed double garage is required for us to improve the existing house. We bought the house because of the potential it has and the considerable size of the plot it stands in. The existing garage we propose to develop is into a master bedroom and turn an existing bedroom at the front of the house into an entrance hall, giving access out of the house. At present, all the sleeping accommodations at one end of the property with no means of access out of the building if there was a fire. We need to change the design of the property to incorporate this for safety reasons and peace of mind.
Ms Franz, sorry, but your 3 minutes is up. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I think you know the procedures, Councillor Copas.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'll start with a bit of background. I initially called in this application. It was the first application. That was the application that's been referred to. That is what you see now, plus the boundary treatment and gates and so on. The planning reasons for calling it in were the effect on the street scene, a significant effect on the street scene, and some concerns about the large area of hard standing on a hill with the front of this property faces downhill. And there's already a considerable problem. Water runs down the main road going downhill here. Whenever there's heavy rain, the water always runs downhill in that spot. So those were the reasons for calling it in. Now this plan has been, as has been stated, amended. So now this committee is only looking at the plan that's before them, which is for this building, and another plan has been submitted separately for boundary treatments and gates. So splitting that up, did it make it acceptable and stop me coming here? Well, no, to my mind, it didn't. In my view, it still has a significant effect on the street scene. We still have a building the size of a 1 or 2 bedroom bungalow right next to the street, on which is a very, very green street, plus still the same amount of hard standing, replacing such a significant amount of front lawn and grass. If we could see the photo of Woodlands Rise, please. Yeah, well, this is our one that I submitted. It's his Photoshop to show, but that is to scale and in the right position. So it's kind of a before and after, and at the top, that's just looking across the plot. And that big white box there is the effect that it would have. And the bottom tier, the before and after, this is standing right outside the plot on Woodlands Rise. and you see the effect that it has. And could we have a final picture of just looking down Woodlands Rise? I did put one in, so Google Earth one. Yeah. And there you see the effect, the street and the character of the street is really, really great.
You have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. Now, there are some houses that have built out bits in front of the property line, but they're garages, regular small garage-sized garages, and they're hidden. When you walk along Woodlands Rise, you don't see them. You know, they're all hidden away. So I think if the committee are inclined to approve, it would be worth a site visit just to check it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corliss. Just before I put this out to the members, the planning officer would like to speak on this again.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to take this opportunity to pick up on a couple of the points raised by the speakers. Just to touch on the drainage, first of all, the applicant could pave the entire frontage of their property for parking, providing that hard standing is porous, which is what they've shown us on the plan. They could do 5 square metres of non-porous material, or they could block pave the entire front surface as long as that surface is porous. So just have that in your mind, that that's permitted development. If you were to consider refusing the application today on the drainage arrangements, they could do the entire thing with a porous hard standing without the need for planning permission. And I just wanted to touch on the photographs referred to by Councillor Corliss. Obviously, we've got a condition on the permission to deal with materials to make sure that those are appropriate for the street scene. And I can't comment on on the accuracy of that plan, or whether that's to scale. It certainly wouldn't be white, and that hedge is obviously new. So just take that image, as it is really an indicative indication of the scale of the building, but I can't comment on its accuracy, and certainly not the materials and finish. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I believe on this one, I think under Councillor Hopton, shall we first to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Always a difficult scenario when you've got neighbours wanting to develop and disagreements between each other, which is a shame. I do know this street quite well. I actually had another view down there today just to clarify things myself. Exactly what Anthony has just said there regarding the hard standing, etc. That doesn't even really seem something we should be debating today at all. You can see from that picture that just was on, if you can just go back, please, Jane, if that's okay. Oh, yeah, the one that's next door. So obviously a substantial development has gone on the other side of the property there, and that's sort of pretty much what it looks like at the moment. So I think that's going from single story to double story. The street scene is not uniform down here. I don't like to disagree with a resident in my ward, but the street scene is not uniform. You can only look at these 2 properties themselves next to each other, and the number 3 is set further back than number 2. That's clear from the drawings, but it's also clear when you go down there. So there's no uniformity in that bit. Number 2 is pretty much to the extent of its boundary either side. Again, you can see that from Google Images as well, that from the existing bungalow or dormer property, you can see in the picture there, which is number 2. At the other side, there's a substantial single story extension that extends right the way to the side boundary. So from my aspect, I'm slightly struggling as to why, with all the initial things gone out around the wall in and everything else, I'm struggling to see how I could object to this, to be honest. So I'll let the debate carry on rather than me just proposing acceptance. But I'll say that for now.
Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll tell you exactly where I'm coming from. I think it's been about 36 years that I've been poring over plans, initially drawing them myself, and I understand plans really quite well. And this has to be the very first time in that 36 years that I've seen a garage with a floor-to-ceiling bifold door in it as well. This is not a garage. This is to be a habitable unit. and don't be gulled by this. There's absolutely no way on this earth, when someone's trying to pull the wool over my eyes, that I'm going to go along with it. So you can see where I'm coming from, but it's not my ward. I'm not going to say anything. I'll pass it on to others.
Councillor Wilkinson. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was putting my hand up thinking there were others that were queuing. Yes, I don't disagree with anything that's been said. Although clearly we can't look at what may or may not happen in the future. That's not what we're here to discuss. Just to clarify to the objector that we don't set precedent in this planning committee, so there is no precedent will be set. The drive itself has already been discussed by officers, is porous, so it's not going to affect any flooding issue. And the garage has a soakaway as well, which is great. It is well screened. I had a look. I haven't visited the property. I wasn't able to. However, I did look on Google Maps and on their views, etc. I appreciate there might be a few actually 2 years out of date, but it still looks pretty good. And it is well screened. I have to say that plots. I think maybe Councillor Hopton mentioned that plots 1 and 2 are already further forward than it. So I'm not 100% sure why that's going to have such a detrimental impact. And the house opposite on the corner has a massive driveway and is much closer and is exactly what people are complaining about here. So there isn't a street scene here that I've seen when I've looked all the way down it on Google Maps and all the way back up. It's quite fragmented. I do understand that there's always a worry when you're next door to something and there's going to be a change. But we on this committee can't look at that. What we've got to look at is whether or not it meets the requirements and whether or not it causes any harm. And I'm struggling to see how this particular building would cause harm at the moment. It's not overlooking anybody. It's well screened. Yes, it's large. But then again, we're not here to decide whether or not they should have a slightly smaller one. I've listened to what others have said, and I've looked very carefully at what the officers have discussed, and I can't help but agree with the fact that with their recommendation to approve, and I will go forward and recommend approval as per the officers' recommendations.
Councillor Meredith, you wanted to be next.
Thank you, Chair. Well, just to touch on one of the points raised by Councillor Wilkinson there, it's not that we don't set precedents, it's that we physically can't set a precedent at planning. Every case must, under policy, be looked at on individual merits. And so just because we've said one thing one time doesn't mean we can't, and let's be honest, in this committee usually do, contradict ourselves at a later date, and that's purely because different measures, different weights all get applied to applications that may appear similar, but they're all unique, otherwise they'd be on the same plots. In that regard, as I say, we can't set a precedent, and similarly, as Councillor Wilkinson's also pointed out, use can't be predetermined. Councillor Robson said he'd never seen something in 36 years, I think, but ultimately we have to decide what's in front of us, and if a use is enacted that isn't part of the permitted approval, then that's a job for planning enforcement. And if anybody's got a crystal ball, please do tell me the lottery numbers. But on a more serious note, we're being asked to approve what we're being asked to approve. If people use it in a different way against the permission that's been granted, should it be approved, then enforcement can stop that and either say you must cease that action or submit a new application to regularise the site. And that would then be us predetermining something to act outside of that at this juncture. The objector did mention that the street scene is beautiful, and it is. It's like something from Fern Gully or Jurassic Park. It's a very green and verdant street, and I was very glad to hear that an originally proposed wall, as mentioned by the applicants, is no longer a part of the proposal, because that would not have sat well in the street scene. But the fact is that 4 of the 7 properties on the south side of the street have garages ahead of the property line. And so this proposal is actually in keeping with the character of the area, although you can't tell that because the street scene is so green and verdant, which thanks to the 100 and odd laurel hedges, this property will be too. So I can't see any justifiable reason to object on visual amenity or street scene grounds, Mr. Chairman. With that in mind, agreeing with Councillor Wilkinson, certain comments made by Councillor Hopton, you want to support residents to protect what is a very beautiful part of the area, but most of the other properties on the street are actually more developed in terms of percentage of the property than this site is. So I'm struggling to find a legitimate and defensible reason to recommend refusal, which therefore leads me to the conclusion I'm happy to second Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Councillor Meredith. Councillor Healy wanted to speak next.
Thank you. Can I just ask officers, because I'm new to this committee, has a site visit happened to this site yet or not? And a formal one? That's first of all. No. I think the issue, if you look at the conclusion of what officers have reached, the problem is that it's so subjective, this. And you could read the conclusion as a valid reason for approving the application, but you could also read the contrary into it because we've heard both sides of the argument. So in summary, the size, scale and design of the proposed development is acceptable and would not detract from the visual amenity of the site or the surrounding area and would not have a significant or unacceptable impact on the amenities, say the officers. But you could equally argue, and it has been argued, I think, by the objector, that the size, scale and design of the proposed development is unacceptable and would detract from the visual amenity of the area or the surrounding area, and it would have a significant or acceptable impact on the amenities. Now, we're being asked here to be judge and juror of this, and I defer to some of my colleagues who know this area and far more than I do, and I've experienced the value of a site visit in terms of being able to look at the street scene and being able to appreciate how far back the other properties are. I think that a site visit might be it would help me. So I'm going to put that forward as a proposal for the committee to consider, because I think that it would certainly help me to reach a decision if I was sitting on the next committee. So I'd like to propose that we have a site visit. Chair.
Thank you very much. Did you put your hand up, Councillor Hopton, or not?
Yeah, not in relation to the site visit, albeit if we've already got a proposer in a second, would that be appropriate? I'm not sure, but I'll let you decide on that bit. I'm fine with the site visit, to be fair. It's 5 minutes from my house, so it's not a big deal. But it's if you look at, not that it'd be a big deal if it's half an hour from my house, but there you go. If you just back to my comment earlier when we were talking about development and size, and quite right as I think Councillor Wilkinson said, the property opposite is much nearer, is much more developed. The site number 4, which is the other side of here, has got a much bigger footprint now because, well, not footprint, but it's livable space because you've got a full upstairs, which didn't have before, and again extends right to the edge of here. So, I can absolutely see why the applicant is looking to further develop this site, because it is a big old site with not a great footprint as such. So, yeah, if people want to go and have a look, I don't see why not, but I don't think you'll gain a great deal more from the actually quite extensive pictures that we've looked at today. So, we've got to be mindful here. I'm slightly struggling why it's been called to committee, to be honest, but to go and have a site visit, we've got this far, I suppose, why not? But yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to second Councillor Healy's recommendation for a site visit, not knowing the area myself there. What I will draw committee's attention to is when we see the picture of the proposed building superimposed on the plan, it does actually impede on the street scene on that particular section of the street. It does look large. It looks quite ugly from that perspective. I've not actually visualised it being there, because obviously it's not there at the moment. Well, I would think if we had our own way, and this is not for this committee to determine, but if we were looking at the harmony of neighbours and the site, we would have a different plan in front of us where it was set further back. I think it's already been raised today that there is room elsewhere for this. And I think, you know, with a bit more thought, perhaps that could have been planned to be set further back. But I would recommend the actual site visit and second that.
Thank you. Anybody? Sorry, just let Councillor. Yes, Councillor Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's already been mentioned. Has there been any sort of prior discussion with officers and the applicant about the garage being set further back? I just want to add to something to that. It appears on aerial view and map view that the garages that are forward of the other properties appear to be half the size of what this proposal is. And I welcome the idea that presumably this is a recent photo and there is some maple, I'm hopeless at plants, hedging growing, which may provide some screening. I'm just wondering whether there was some prior discussion about it being further back, which I think it was my property. I think I would do, but that's just me. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, if you had to come in, please.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. No, there was no pre-application discussions, but when an applicant makes an application for planning permission, we have to determine the application on the basis of what's before us. So they've asked for a garage forward of the house. That's what they've applied for. That's what we're considering today. We've recommended approval. Just to comment on the size of it, I mean, the garage element of it internally is 6 by 6. That's the minimum size standard required for a double garage. If it were smaller, it wouldn't provide a usable car parking space. The gym element of it is the same depth of the garage at 6 and 3 metres wide for a home ancillary, whether they use that as a gym or a hobby room or whatever they decide to use that for. That's not an enormous structure. I don't feel, particularly considering the size of the plot, the size of the frontage and neighbouring development. So just to comment on that, and in terms of its use, that's been raised, concerns about how it might be used. That is conditioned tightly by condition 3, where if it's used or occupied at any time other than for purposes ancillary to the residential use of the dwelling, then we would have enforcement power to go down and prevent that if it were used for some kind of commercial purpose or as a separate residential dwelling, for example. We would have appropriate enforcement powers to deal with that. So hopefully that puts your mind at ease, I suppose.
Just have a second.
Have you finished now, Councillor Gill? Did that answer your question?
So I just have an extension to that, if I may. If you pardon the pun. Is it one of these cases that we could defer it for submission of a submitted plan where it's further back? We can't do that. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, through you, we have to determine the application on the basis of the information submitted. If you're not comfortable with the forward of the house, then the only option available to you is to refuse the application. The applicant could then resubmit for a garage further back, but we can't negotiate a completely revised scheme as part of this application. You need to determine this application on its merits.
I believe you wanted to speak again, Councillor Hopton.
I did, yeah. Sorry to talk again on the same subject, but I totally agree where Councillor Needham's coming from about harmony of neighbours. However, I wouldn't see moving it further back as harmony. I would say that would be the applicant almost being forced to agree with what the objector is saying, which it doesn't really seem fair. It is a garage, but it was quite clearly said. And I know where Councillor Robson's coming from to a degree, but at the same time, the applicant is making this application in good faith. I'm not wanting, he's saying he wants a garage and a gym. Any inference I think is unfair on a member of the public, to be honest, in that aspect. So, and also obviously behind these properties, there is some tree area, and then it's the A63. So, again, if you were redesigning this street, you would move number 3 forward a good bit, not the rest of the buildings back, because you've got this sort of great big area at the front and a much smaller area at the back. So, you could say, you know, number 4 hasn't knocked it down and rebuilt it. I think they've put a second floor on top, but you know, there could be the argument if the applicant had thought, well, actually, I'll start from scratch, I'll move it forward, and I'll build a much bigger property based on that. So we're sort of slightly going round in circles about stuff here. I think for me, we've had a proposal and a seconder at first, and I don't know what the order is on that, but I would be quite happy to go along with that, to be honest.
Right, we'll have councillor Cottages and then we'll move to the vote. I think we've discussed the merits of this quite considerably.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to answer councillor Hopton's, because councillor Healy's proposal was an amendment to the original motion, we'd take the amendment first, so we'll vote on that first. Which brings me to the point that I think the debate has been really helpful. The officers' comments were really helpful. While I'm not familiar with the area, I think there have been a lot of pictures, the plans detailed and the drawings are detailed. So I'm comfortable that I'm able to make a decision without the site visit. I don't feel that the site visit would add a great deal more insight, if any. I don't think there's any planning reasons, defendable reasons to refuse this. Therefore, I'll be voting in line with the original proposal, which was for approval in line with officers' recommendations, and I'll be voting against the site visit. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Right, so we've had a proposal for a site visit. Councillor Healy, seconded by Councillor Needham. So we can, we'll just go to the vote on that one first. All those in favour of a site visit? That amendment is lost. So we've had a proposal from Councillor Wilkinson for approval. The offers a recommendation, seconded by Councillor Meredith. Can we just move to the vote? Yes, please. Those against? One. Any abstentions? One. So that application is for approval by the officers is approved. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, so that planning application has been approved by a planning office, by this committee. Thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda is agenda item number 4, page 7.
Thank you, Chair. So there's just some updates to the officer report, and then I'll provide an overview of the application as well following the previous meeting last month. So regarding updates, we have received a further letter of objection since the publication of the report. This raises no new issues previously considered and predominantly concerns highways impacts. We've also recommended a further condition, which requires a cycle and pedestrian link up to the adjoining western boundary to be provided prior to the occupation of any dwelling. So this has been used previously on approval 23-01680 STPLF to the south. The wording of condition 9 is also amended to be prior to occupation. So the reason for this is that construction traffic is utilising Becklands, so it would be unreasonable to not allow development to commence prior to Medforth Street's adoption. And then finally, the appendices on your agenda, it's noted that these for the 2 applications of Medforth Street are in the wrong order. So the appendices for the 8-unit scheme is actually on pages 68 to 76, and vice versa for the 21-unit scheme, which is being discussed later. So just an overview as well. So the previous meeting deferred this application to allow for information on the status of the adoption process of Medforth Street and the secondary access to be investigated. Regarding the former, I can confirm the adoption process of Medforth Street is currently ongoing, and the Highways team leader is here today to answer any questions on the status of this process at the current time, where possible. However, we are anticipating the adoption to be moving to the maintenance stage in the near future prior to formal adoption next year. A condition has been included within the recommendation which requires Medforth Street to be adopted prior to the occupation of the dwellings proposed as part of the scheme. So this was suggested as part of the debate during the previous meeting and is included as part of the updated committee report. In regards to access points, we have a plan provided within the agenda, I think is shown on the screens now, which shows the Market Wheaton B allocation and the developments that have been approved and or built within this allocation. So an access from the Home Road roundabout into the allocation was approved and provided as part of the 71 unit scheme in the western part of the allocation. So this will link into the 193 unit scheme approved under reference 23/01953/STPLF, and the outline approval to the north approved under 22/01242 STOUT for 120 dwellings. A pedestrian cycle link or pedestrian or cycle link will be provided to the allocation MWF to the northeast via the 120 unit outline site. A vehicle link is provided from the 193 unit scheme into the parcel of land that is currently undeveloped to the west of the application site, as you can see on the agenda. Application 23/01680 STPLF approved 24 units with access onto Home Road. This will link into the land to the east and west via pedestrian and cycle link and does not provide a vehicle link as the junction with Home Road is not adequate to allow vehicular connectivity with the land to the west. In regards to Medforth Street, which is on the eastern side of the allocation, so this formed the initial stage of the allocation for 49 units and a health centre, with the application proposing to create a vehicle link from Medforth Street to the development. A pedestrian and cycle link is shown to the western boundary, as it was considered that a vehicle link through to the remainder of the allocation could significantly increase traffic on Medforth Street and Northgate Vale. A traffic regulation order is proposed, as outlined in the recommendation, on the junctions of Medforth Street and Northgate Vale and York Road to restrict vehicles parking on the highway. Construction traffic is also conditioned to be via Becklands Industrial Estate. So the Highways Officer has raised no objections to the scheme, as the proposal would not have a significant impact on public highway safety, nor a severe impact on the local highway network, and is in full compliance with the MPPF and local plan. In addition, as set out in paragraph 6.7 in the report, there is full compliance with the requirements of the allocation. It's just a reminder that the allocation and strategy documents are read as a whole. In summary, the application proposes residential development on an allocated site within the development limits of Market Wheaton. It complies with local and national planning policy, and no material objections are raised by consultees that cannot be addressed through appropriate conditions under section 106 as set out in your agenda. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, just before we move on to speakers, if you remember, this came before us at the last planning meeting, and one of the concerns from everybody was the fact lack of more detail and the planning and the previous applications, etc. Well, I think that's been answered so very well by the officers, thankfully, and so there's been plenty to read. So before we move on to that one, I'll just have the first speaker, which is a Mr. P. Baldwin, objector. Three minutes, Mr. Baldwin, with a 30-second warning. Thank you.
My original objection when I came about 3 weeks ago was the fact that I felt that Northgate Vale and Medforth Street were not adequate as access to this site. Now, I'm not sure, I couldn't follow all that, whether there's been any further developments. I'm not aware that there is another access to this site, but anyway, just one or 2 points to bring up. This is what people had written with regards to the state of traffic on Medforth Street. And bear in mind that there's a doctor's surgery there which caters for 9,000 patients and a population of 7,500 in Market Wheaton. Traffic has definitely picked up. It doesn't help the way some people park, taking up pavements on blind corners all over the road near the GPs. I don't think it has much to do with the residents and is more to do with those visiting. It would be great if there was an alternative route to the GPs, but most would still go down Northgate Vale. It would be great if people didn't bomb around corners and remembered we live here and deserve to be able to get in and out of our drives and walk the pavements without having to go into the road around parked cars. Another resident said that they agreed with the comments. Another person, and this is someone who doesn't live on Medforth Street or Northgate Vale. I don't live near the doctors, but the road to the doctors is definitely not fit for the traffic it gets. People park on blind corners, drive too fast, take up the whole road. There are potholes and recently a lot of workmen. It's very crowded. It definitely needs a new route to the surgery that is solely for the surgery. Thirdly, the road is not fit for purpose. Time they sorted out a new route to the surgery, and why didn't they do it in the first place is beyond me and everyone I talk to. Lots of potholes appearing now, particularly on Northgate Vale, making it dangerous. Now, if this estate was what I would call a dormitory estate, whereby most of the traffic goes up and down Medforth Street, Northgate Vale, between say 7 and 9 in the morning, and when people come at night between 5 and 7, then that would be fair enough. But at the moment, we have far more traffic coming down there than the road can actually cope with. The other thing I'm concerned with as well is the amount of air pollution that, once again, this road or these two roads are probably busier than York Road. With this traffic coming down, we're getting the exhaust, which does hang around in cold weather. So people's clear air is not always there. So we have to suffer from that. Also, some people haven't complained.
You have
because
30 seconds left.
Okay, that's fine. Some people haven't complained because initially, when they built the David Wilson estate, they said they would close the connection between Northgate Vale and Medforth Street, and that didn't happen. So people felt very let down. And finally, there's a new resident at the end of Medforth Street, just before you get into Northgate Vale, who has a big van, a big transit van and a Range Rover, which he parks outside the house, thus reducing that piece of road to half the width. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baldwin. The next speaker is the agent, Mr. J. Tate. Thank you, Mr. Tate. Yeah, 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Thank you.
That's on. Thank you, Chairman. Just first off, a little bit of an apology for the frustration expressed at the last planning committee. There was 90 minutes of debate, and obviously there was a number of questions that were unanswered, and apologies from me about the level of my frustration at that meeting. I was worried that the committee were going to make a bad decision because of lack of information and because of some misunderstandings, but I'm glad that officers have been able to update members, and members now can hopefully see some of the information that's now been put forward by officers in clarification of the issues that were raised. This is an application by a local business. They employ local people. They build houses on a brownfield site here that's allocated in the plan. And these are real jobs that are going to provide in this building phase. Just to put in perspective, I appreciate the comments from Mr. Baldwin, but in actual fact, the level of objection to this application is very, very low. There's over 100 houses on Northgate Vale and Medforth Street, and there is 9 letters of objection recorded in the officer's report. In the next application, there's only 6 letters of objection. It's not as controversial, I don't think, as people have been raising. There was a few questions that were raised last time. What does the local plan say about this site? The local plan allocates the site for housing. We're in accordance with that. It suggests that we need to provide significant landscape buffering to the A1079. Well, that's not relevant for this one. It requires the removal of the pig unit. Well, we know that's now getting redeveloped with housing. It requires pedestrian and cycle links, and the officers have mentioned about the cycle links through the site. It requires a sustainable drainage scheme. I'll come on to that. And it requires it to be prepared in accordance with an adopted master plan. Members will have seen in the questions and answers that we've provided that there is a master plan for this site. It has been signed off, and that's the master plan that this council signed off back in 2016. So these proposals are generally in line with that master plan. In terms of traffic, which has been a big issue, officers from highways confirm the traffic levels are not severe. Obviously, this is a relatively low scale of development. Of the 288 houses that have been approved as part of this development, only 10% of them or so are coming off Medford Street, Northgate Vale. There's no requirement for them all to come off other directions and Home Road, but in the actual fact, the vast majority do, 90% of them do. Mention is made in the report about an appeal decision that took place at Oak Lee off Northgate Vale, and I'd urge members to have a look at that. Mention is made about the adoption of the road, and in reality, given that it's going to be at least 12 months before these houses are built, that's going to raise no issue for the client in terms of compliance with that condition. So I hope this time members have all the information they need, and they'll be able to hopefully approve this application this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tate. Thank you. Just before I pass out to councillors, obviously the highways is the main issue, but thankfully today we've got Mr. Andrew Forrester with us from the highways, so I'll hopefully be able to clear any concerns that any councillors have got. So with Councillor Carey, it's your ward, so have you any like to start the debate?
Yeah, just to make it clear, and our planning officer give us quite a good description of what's going forward. Will there be a road from the roundabout on the 1079 through to the new development and to this development we're looking at now?
So the access to on the western boundary of this application site is a pedestrian and cycle access, no vehicle access. Yeah. So that is agreed by the highways officers. So their response to this application back in October 2022, I'll quote it word for word, so there's no confusion. So initial plans received showed the proposal to link through the remainder of the allocation. However, given the rest of the allocation could significantly increase traffic utilising the three junctions, that's Medforth Street, Northgate Vale and York Road, it has been agreed to create a cul-de-sac with a foot/cycle link to the remainder of the allocation. This approach has been agreed with East Riding Yorkshire Council's forward planning, transport policy and traffic and parking teams. So it's no vehicle access, just a pedestrian and cycle.
So basically there's no change from our last meeting, and there's no further development of stopping off Medforth Street. Am I correct?
Yes, so Medforth Street would serve this application site and the site to the south, which is the next agenda item. So then there wouldn't be any further vehicle link to the rest of the allocation. So this is as part of, as I think one of the speakers mentioned, it's in the officer report as well, there was an appeal decision for further access off Medforth Street in 2018, which basically confirmed that Medforth Street and Northgate Vale could accommodate additional vehicle movements. So this application proposes that, but stops any further linkages through vehicles to the remainder of the allocation.
So in paragraph 37 of the local plan, that no more potential development would go through Northgate Vale.
It was the planning decision from 2012 for Medforth Street, not the local plan. Sorry, I just didn't want any confusion there. Sorry, Councillor Carey.
Yes, from what I understand is that it was, so that was in 2012 when Medforth Street and the doctors was approved, the health centre. So the appeal decision was at a later date, so that's obviously 2018. From my understanding is that it was agreed the condition actually was not enforceable because it relied on land outside the application site in the first instance. So it was denying opportunity for further access into land outside the ownership of the applicant for Medforth Street. So actually the condition wasn't enforceable.
Thank you.
Any other councillors wishing to speak on this one? Yes, Councillor Carey.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the comments that were made earlier there, and 6.25 on page 15, regarding the comments by the inspector on appeal, is the inspector basically saying that it's okay for traffic to go down Medford Street for the development of these 8 dwellings? Because if the inspector is actually saying that's allowed, we can't really go against what he's saying, can we? Is that correct?
Yeah, so the appeal decision was, obviously it's not on this application site, it was for an additional 17 dwellings off Medford Street. But the council agreed in their statement that Northgate Vale and Medford Street could accommodate additional traffic movements, and that was agreed by the inspector for that application. So that is still the consideration now. Highways are still of the consideration that Northgate Vale and Medford Street could accommodate the additional vehicle movements associated with this development and the further development as part of the next agenda item.
Thank you, Carl. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Wilkinson. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Had a very good read of this. I know this particular road quite simply because I had to have some injections to go off to some exotic location, and I went to this particular health centre because they were the closest ones that had them, and I was surprised that it was the way it's described. I was surprised it was a lot better than than what I expected when I got there. So it's our highways have laid out that there's going to be no severe impacts with the amount of traffic that's going to be added on. So they're our consultees, they're the ones, the experts, and they've said that. So, and to be fair, 8 houses, given the amount of traffic that goes down to those doctors, isn't going to make that big a difference. The trouble is the highway, of course, isn't adopted at the moment, so there's no enforcement we can do or nothing we can do at the moment because it's not ours. But when it is adopted, we have a different point of view then. It's 8 houses. It's got a density of less than 10 per hectare, which we're looking at 30 per hectare normally as a target. So, you know, it's a fantastic site in terms of spaced out. Amazingly enough, of those 8 houses, 25% of them are going to be affordable homes as well. So that's an incredible effort that the officers have made to get that. I am extremely impressed that on condition number 17, you've got hedgehog highways and hedgehog houses, and that's my big thing. So I'm very pleased about that. Overall, honestly, I think this is actually very good now. We've got all the information. I've struggled before when we didn't have quite all the answers, but I'm quite comfortable with what it is. I appreciate it's another add-on to people, and there'll always be concern when there's changes. But right now, I'm very comfortable with what it is, and I will like to propose that we go forward with the officers' proposals of defer and delegate to ensure that we have a 106 agreement signed, which gives the extra bits for them. Thank you.
Councillor Healy.
Yeah, I think that's sensible. It's an allocated site. Okay, this area has been developed in a kind of piecemeal way, which is the way things have happened, but this is 8 additional houses, and the main concerns were highway concerns. And I think we have to take note of the highways officers who are saying that they don't think that the addition of 8 houses is going to create a significant impact here. I take the point about inconsiderate parking and Range Rovers blocking half the carriageway and stuff, but that's not really an issue. I mean, that's an enforcement issue for the police if things are not, you know, if people are parking illegally. I mean, one could consider, and it's been, I don't know whether it's been mentioned about, I think I saw it in here about no waiting restrictions. Are they part of the recommendations? Sorry. But I think, but yeah, I think they should be. But overall, I mean, the impact, I think, on the highway is deemed to be fairly negligible. And whilst I hear the objections, I think with an allocated site and a community that's been developed in this way in a piecemeal fashion, I would be happy to second that. But I would just like to ask you about the no waiting, if that's okay, Callum. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, so the traffic regulation orders, so that will include the no waiting. So that's on the junction of Medforth Street and Northgate Vale and and York Road.
Thank you.
Councillor Meredith, you indicated to speak.
Actually, thank you, Chair. I did want to come in earlier, but I find myself in a very rare situation where Councillor Wilkinson and Healy have said everything. I've been ticking off the comments on my list, and everyone was mentioned.
Yes, Councillor Robson.
Thank you. I find myself in a very rare situation where Councillor Meredith doesn't actually have anything to say. Yeah, at the last meeting, the big concerns were about the adoption of Medforth Street and the access via the industrial estate. I think a lot of the access and highway problems have now been clarified to us, and I'm far more comfortable with allowing this to go through than I was last time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, this is more clear than we had last time, and I'm really pleased with that. In my mind, really, I personally don't think this scheme, taking into account everything else, is creative enough. And to me, it's more common sense to have an access on Home Road because there's less houses down there, and it just eases the situation. That's my personal opinion. But we're faced always with what's legal situations. And as Councillor Meredith always reminds me, there's no policy for common sense. That's where my heart is. Sadly, my head in this case, because of the situation, I feel we have no option but to approve. I don't think it's right, but that's the situation. Thank you.
Finally, we'll have Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't want to disappoint, and in truth, I had lots to say. It's just other people beat me to it. Just wanted to clarify that.
Well, that makes a change, Councillor Meredith. Right, right, we've got Councillor Wilkinson's proposed approval of this plan application, seconded by Councillor Healy. So we'll just move to the
recommendations that.
the officer's recommendation for delegation and approval. So we've had a proposal from yourself, seconded by Councillor Healy. So we'll just move to the vote to recommend for defer and delegate officer approval. Against?
Against.
Abstentions? No. Apologies. That's been approved for defer and delegate for officer approval on the planning application. Thank you very much. So now we can move on to agenda item number 5. So basically, this is obviously one of the same planning application, just for more houses across on the other side. But if you want to come in with that one, Callum?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I won't go through the overview of the applications again, but with an update, there was the letter of objection, which I mentioned on part of the previous application, had also been submitted for this application as well, which concerned highways impacts. The wording of condition 10 on this application has been amended, not whereas before it was condition 9, which is due to the prior occupation due to construction traffic using Becklands. And then the final update is just again about the appendices are attached to agenda item 4 rather than 5. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We still have the two speakers to speak again on this one. We still have a Mr. P. Baldwin. Would like to speak on this application again, please? Thank
you. I'd looked at this really as one development rather than two. So when I've been talking about access down Northgate Vale and Medforth Street, I'm looking at this 21 houses and 8 houses, which makes 29 properties, which isn't the same as having just 8 buildings. So that more or less triples the amount of traffic. As I said in my last meeting, that could be up to 60 more vehicles. And as I say, with the doctors being there, I don't agree. Obviously, the highways people have their views, I have mine, but I can't really change what I've said. I still object to it, and I still think the traffic situation is intolerable, and this is not going to make it any better. Was there access from Home Road or someone else, I wouldn't object to it, but at the moment, the traffic coming down Medforth Street is ridiculous. I have no more to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baldwin. Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so I won't repeat exactly what I'd said previously, but it is heartening that members have obviously done a lot of reading on the previous application and this one, and seen that fairly lengthy update from officers. So I am very, very grateful for that. The only thing I would mention about this scheme for 21 dwellings is that we haven't been ignoring the objective, Mr. Baldwin. I do understand his concerns about traffic. He also at the last meeting expressed a concern about the property on the layout that was immediately adjacent to his property. My client did go and meet with Mr. Baldwin to talk about the relationship of that proposed dwelling to his property, and we have amended the application slightly since the last planning committee by handing that dwelling across, so that he's now got a driveway and a gap to his boundary, so the properties move further away. Mr. Baldwin didn't mention that. I'm not putting words into his mouth, but I think he was happy with that amendment, which did address that layout issue. So again, it was just to point out that we are not ignoring local residents. My client does take local concerns seriously, but we tried to address that. So hopefully that's a helpful amendment, but hopefully members will be able to support this application for the same reason as they did the previous one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Right, well, let's move on to the agenda item. Yes, Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. I'll get in first so I can speak a bit. But no, I think I'm going to just echo what Councillor Gill said last time. I don't like seeing Medforth Street used. I don't agree that it should be used, unfortunately, and I'm going to use another one of my sayings. Planning is an art and highways is a science. I'm not allowed to disagree with Mr. Force, even if I want to. At least I can't make a decision on those grounds. So don't like it, but it's heart versus head, and unfortunately head has to win. So just as with the last application, nothing but sympathy for the objector, doubly so with the medical centre and the 9,000 patients, but I can't see a way of objecting to this because it is in breach of the 2012 permission and condition 37 there, but that got overturned in 2018 by the appeal. So the grounds to refuse this don't exist anymore and haven't for 7 years. So it's a very awkward one. I don't want to support it, but I don't see an alternative, quite frankly. So that's why I'll shut up and let other people speak in case someone's found something.
Councillor Healy.
Just a question actually for Mr. Forsey. On the previous application, the comments around highways were very much like it's only another 8 houses and it's not going to have a big impact. And it is a fair point that was made that this is actually 29 houses really altogether. But your comments on this one, you don't say quite as, you're not quite as sort of confident about it. I mean, you were saying that 8 isn't going to make much of a difference, but you don't sort of say too much here about what 21 will do, plus the other 8, which is 29. Could you just comment overall on the combined impact really of both of these, rather than just taking the one on its own and making comments on that one? Thanks.
Yeah. Well, the two developments together are not considered to be a severe impact on the local highway network. We've got the proposed traffic regulation orders in place, which will improve visibility and accessibility to the whole site as it is. We've also got a slight highway improvement to the highway outside of number 2 Medford Street, which gives far better visibility at that junction. And that was one of the main concerns why we didn't want to go through to the remainder of the site, because of that lack of visibility at that junction. And while I'm here, if I can just continue about where we are with the adoption status of the highway. Yorkshire Water have this month put the sewers on the 12 months maintenance period. And as many of you councillors are aware, we can't adopt a highway without the sewers being adopted. So the highway remedial works have almost been completed, if not being completed this week. And at that point, we will then be going on highway maintenance for up to the point where the sewers are adopted. So as soon as the sewers are adopted, we can adopt the highway as public highway, and then we can look at putting some TROs on Medford Street as well, to prevent some parking outside of the medical centre. Thank you.
That answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah, can I move approval of this?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I was just having a quick look and for something that I'd written down and couldn't quite work out what my notes said, so forgive me. It's just on condition 13. It mentions about, I'll let you find it first before I prattle on. It just mentions about a solid timber fence, which is basically 10 feet high, along the length of the the development. For noise, I was 10 feet high, and a long fence seems quite an enormous beast. Given the fact we've just had an issue with an acoustic fence that was agreed to be put up on a development in Gilberdike, and then that was then changed. How confirmed are we that this is going to continue to be the acoustic fence we're expecting, and that we're comfortable that's exactly what it's going to be?
Yeah, thank you, councillor. So that condition, I think, was actually requested by Public Protection on the basis of the fact that the pig farm was still in operation at the time of their comments. As you can see on the Market Wheaton overlay, the 193 dwelling scheme, which has been approved, includes the removal of that pig unit. So it's up to the developer if they then seek to amend that condition at a later date on the basis that the pig unit has been removed from the site, because the reason was due to the pig unit noise, etc. So we'd obviously come to that conclusion if an application to vary that condition came in the future, but at this moment in time the pig unit is still there. As far as I'm aware, the 193 unit scheme hasn't commenced, or it's not removed the pig unit, which I think that's condition 2 or 3, and it's prior to occupation of any part of the 193 unit scheme. So it's not prior to commencement, it's prior to occupation. So that condition was requested by Public Protection on the basis that the pig unit was still in operation at the time. So that's still the case as far as I'm aware at the moment. So the condition still bites. If it then applicant seeks to amend that at a later date on the basis that the pig unit is no longer there, we'd obviously consider it at the time in conjunction with Public Protection.
If I could just bring in Diane on the legal side, she's got some clarification that might help you, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr Chairman and councillors. Just a short point coming from that, though, whether that condition goes forward in its present form or another one, in any event, it's prior to the occupation of the development. So it will be in the developer's interest to produce a suitable form of acoustic fencing, whatever that requirement be at that time. He won't be able to sell the plots without it, and I'm sure that he won't want that to happen.
Thank you for the clarification. I think that makes me feel a little more comfortable. I was going to say that whilst we obviously can't suggest this to the officers, I wouldn't suggest that we should have a fence of some description of even if the pig unit gets on. It doesn't have to be a 10-foot one.
Right. Right. Yeah, Councillor Carey first. Sorry.
As a ward councillor, I'd just like to reassure Mr Baldwin that the potholes, etc., on Northgate Vale are being addressed and putting the white line back in place. So hopefully that will help with that aspect of the job. Thank you.
Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I just wanted to ask Councillor Wilkinson whether the fence was intended to protect the people from the pigs or the pigs from the people.
Well, if you were an ex-councillor called Dewhurst, he'd probably talk about the pigs more than I would.
You've made Animal Farm as well.
Moving swiftly on. We've had a proposal from Councillor Healy for approval. Do we have for others recommendations for delegate and approval? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilkinson. Okay, so we'll move on to the vote then. So we've had a proposal from Councillor Healy for approval, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favour of the approval? Those against? Any abstentions? There are none. Thank you. So that has been approved for defer and delegate for officers' approval to complete the legal agreement and conditions set out in the report. Thank you very much indeed. Right, the next agenda item we have got now is agenda item number 6, page 77. Oh. Sorry, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is an application for change of use of land to residential garden and the setting of a static caravan in connection with the host dwelling known as the Greenlands. There's one update, and that's a plan that you'll see before you. The location plan has been amended slightly to accurately show a picket fence, which will be the boundary on the eastern side of this proposal. It's recommended for approval and subject to the conditions recommended in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have Mrs. S. Schumacher to speak on this application. Thank you. Yeah. Just turn your microphone on. You have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Stephanie Schumacher. I'd like to tell you why we put the lodge, which is the static caravan or granny flat, on agricultural land, and also address.
Mrs. Schumacher, so could you get nearer the microphone or bend it down
Sorry.
towards yourself a bit more? That's
Also address concerns about planning precedents. So it was my dad's health went really downhill after COVID. He's very old and he began experiencing sudden blackouts where he'd collapse, unable to move for hours, but was still fully conscious. After some hospital visits, we were told there was no treatment and we had to manage his condition ourselves. He was living alone in a rundown house, so we acted quickly to ensure his safety, which is why we placed the lodge before completing the change of use application. It was a temporary measure for his care. We applied for retrospective planning permission to change the use of the land to domestic garden. I bought the land where the lodge is for garden 11 years ago, and then the field around the house 9 years ago, at which point we continued the fence line to extend the garden further. We didn't formally change the land's use as we didn't landscape it and we let the animals in there, but it's always been a natural extension of our residential space. When my dad got ill, we submitted pre-planning application, but he got worse and there wasn't enough time to complete the full planning application. We tried a panic button to give us more time, but he couldn't press it and he'd hit his head on 2 occasions, so our priority was his safety. We did follow the advice given by Callum in pre-planning to place the lodge on the east side inside the village boundary. Both us and the neighbours preferred the south side, but we followed the planning guidance. To minimise disruption to the land, we didn't set the lodge back and remove the hedge, as it's temporary and the hedge is well established. We've taken steps to minimise its impact. We put it as far away from the neighbour's fence as possible, and we've planted 15 new trees along the boundary. Other mobile homes have been in the village over the years, so it doesn't set a new precedent. Each case is judged on its own merits, and this isn't an attempt to permanently develop the land. The lodge will be removed as soon as my dad no longer needs it. If this application is denied, my dad will have nowhere suitable to live and we won't be able to care for him properly. It's just a compassionate family-based solution to an urgent need. We're happy to accept
You have 30
conditions
seconds left.
like additional screening to address any concerns, but we followed the guidance and minimised impact and acted responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So that was Councillor Carey, this is in, would I speak on this one? It's your ward.
Not at the moment, Chair. I'll open the floor to the other councillors and I'll come back if I need to do.
Right. Yes, Councillor Robbs.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that the caravan is supposedly half in and half out of the boundary, but in fact, if you look at the photograph, it's there's only a small part that actually goes over the boundary, as you can see. So for that reason and for the reasons stated by the applicant, I would like to move approval on this so that they don't have to wait any longer for this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Healy.
Yeah, officers are recommending approval of this. There's no objections. It doesn't affect any other properties. There's no issue with that. And it's agricultural land which is being turned into a garden, and they're going to put a caravan on it for a particular period of time to help their arrangements with their father. It seems very sensible to me. I don't see anything wrong with it at all. I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Meredith, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, just to say I'm a carer for my mother as well. I know the issues that can be involved with that, the stress, the pressures, the need for flexibility, for instant access. You know, I was late for a meeting the other day, called, nobody answered the phone. You know, you panic and you rush home because you want to make sure they're okay. Fully understand that. However, we must look at this from a planning and a purely planning point of view. And truth be told, personal circumstances don't have any place in this decision. So whilst I agree with Councillors Robson and Healy and will be supporting approval, it's because I don't believe this sets a precedent. I do believe this is an acceptable form of development. I do believe there's no detriments, and I do think, as the applicant has pointed out, that they actually were looking at other places they'd prefer, but they did it here because it was the least impactful. They've been considerate of policy, and so it's approvable on those grounds. And I just wanted to say, and just for the record and in the interest of transparency, my heart absolutely bleeds for anybody in that position, and I have both empathy and sympathy because personal circumstances dictate I'm in a similar boat. But I just wanted to make sure it was very clear that as much as I agree with the reasoning behind it, that hasn't entered my head whilst looking at making a decision on this. It's purely on planning policy.
Thank you. Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think we would all sympathise with the personal circumstances of residents where they struggle with this sort of accommodation and attempt to create accommodation that makes people more comfortable there. But again, we need to consider planning reasons for whether we support, approve or refuse those. If I can draw the committee's attention to section 6.5, change use of land, it identifies that the area subject to change of use of land lies beyond the limits, and so for the understanding of planning policy is considered countryside, as identifiable in policy section 4. Now, we have many discussions in this chamber, and depending on how it suits members around the table, where it is in the countryside, we are often objecting on the grounds of that planning rule. And I think the same really should be considered here. If this was in someone else's ward and they were referring to this particular area of planning, they will and would have, as it has happened before, be wanting to refuse this. And therefore, we are setting a precedent in as much as we're allowing for development in the countryside, which for the majority of us do not support. So on this particular application, I would be recommending refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Needham. Yes, Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. In response to Councillor Needham, this is not a development. It's a non-permanent structure, and therefore you can't consider it a development outside the development area. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We come to that word again, precedent, which we don't set here, but seems to be used an awful lot. However, in this particular case, it's I think we've just said, took the words out of my mouth, but it's a non-permanent structure, specifically said that it's not supposed to be used there. And quite frankly, it would have been very easy for them just to apply to increase the curtilage of their home, and then they wouldn't have been out there. And let's face it, every single piece of new property that we develop is on open countryside. Just because it's in our development limit doesn't mean it's not open countryside. We suddenly change, it's still countryside. We just happen to take it and say, because we put a little ring around it, it's suddenly not open countryside. So we're talking here about hanging the over a little bit of a caravan, which they could just increase their curtilage. I did on my home. As long as they own the land, just call it a garden and apply to the council to do that. And that would have been probably have resolved any issues in terms of going into the open countryside. In this case, honestly, Every single time I look at an application, I come up with the first thing I say, does it do any harm? And in this case, no, and therefore I can go on for the rest of it. So I'll be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I seem to remember this morning when we had our pre-planning meeting, there was something, an adjustment on the fencing. You said this drawing didn't actually show the true positioning of it. There was an amendment, I believe, or did I mishear that, Keith?
Yes, Chairman, there's a revised location plan that we had just had displayed, which accurately now shows the photograph that you just seen a second ago, whereas before it was just slightly to the west.
Right, thank you. So we've had a proposal for refusal, sorry, wasn't seconded, right? Right, well, let's move on to the vote. Is there anybody wishing to speak? Right, we'll move on to the vote then. So we've had a proposal from Councillor Robson, for approval, seconded by Councillor Healy, for approval with conditions set out in the report. All those in favour of approval? And against? Councillor. Thank you. Right, that planning application has been approved, subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the erection of a perimeter fencing to tennis courts 1 and 2 and to replace existing fencing and the installation of tweener LED lighting system along 2 sides, the western and eastern sides. Since the publication of the agenda, 2 further comments have been received. 1 in support, which highlights the benefits of the extended playing hours provided by the lighting. And conflict to that, an objection which raises issues already contained in the report. So they talk about the impact on amenity from increased hours and intensification of the use, and also impact from lighting, and also issues with the accuracy of the submitted information within the application. The application is recommended for approval. It is a balanced report, weighing up the harm and the positives, and recommended with approval subject to the conditions.
Thank you very much. Is it Councillor Needham's? Oh, do apologise, I've got a speaker first, sorry. Yeah, we've got a Mr. C. Fowler, sorry, if you'd come forward, please, sorry. Just press your microphone, please, Mr. Fowler. Mr. Fowler, can you press your microphone, please? Sorry. That's...
Oh, thank you.
You have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Thank you.
Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to present our objection to the tennis court floodlights. The invasive and intense lights will be too close to residential properties and occupants. The tennis courts are on Beacon Green and closely surrounded by 12 homes and the village hall. Planning permission for these courts was for seasonal daytime use only. I speak for neighbours who cannot be here. We say the light spread diagram in the application is not accurate. The light spread diagram provided by the tennis club has been produced by the manufacturer to sell a product, therefore self-promoting. It is not independent, it is unreliable. It has too readily been accepted. The diagram wrongly shows light stopping at timber fences, but the light will shine over. I will demonstrate this. I am 1.7 metres tall. The timber fences are 1.8 metres. The floodlights will be at 2.8 metres, the same height as this beam. Light will therefore shine right over the wooden fences. The distance from the tennis courts to the surrounding properties and their rooms is very close. From the courts to the timber fence, just over 2 metres. That is about this desk length.
From the courts to my house, it is just over 14 metres. Chairman, that is the distance between you and me. The distance is even closer to my immediate neighbour of 4 metres. Photographs of the same floodlights at the Craven Tennis Club show how easily light spills out from the courts, illuminating the clubhouse and the roof. It would be the same into the house bedrooms and social rooms. On welfare, not everyone plays tennis. There are recreational and physical activities at the cricket club, playing fields and in the village hall. Health and well-being of tennis players, many from outside the village, is important, but so is the health and well-being of residents surrounding Beacon Green. Invasive lights could cause anxiety, sleep deprivation and illness. Sudden flashing on of floodlights could distract drivers.
30 seconds left.
Thank you. Cut-off times, we have provided a better solution, but unfortunately, they have not been fully accepted. Chairman, in conclusion, without a full site visit, and because of the unreliable light spread diagram so readily accepted, at the very least, we ask the committee for a deferral and to request an independent examination of the lighting effects and accurate proof with a demonstration, therefore avoiding a costly installation that might have to be removed in the future. Perhaps you've asked yourself, would you want floodlights just a few metres from my family home?
Okay, Mr. Fowler, that's your 3 minutes. Thank you very
thought
much
so. Thank
indeed.
you, sir.
Thank you. We have Mr. G. Hobson, who is the applicant. Again, 3 minutes, Mr. Hobson, and a 30-second warning.
Members of the Planning Committee, my name is George Hobson. I'm here on behalf of Sutton-upon-Derwent Tennis Club, where I'm part of the committee and volunteer my time looking after our 2 natural grass and 2 artificial grass tennis courts. Right now, our playing time is limited by daylight. From autumn to spring, the sun sets early, forcing us to cut matches short or miss out on play altogether. A successful outcome today regarding the Tweena floodlights will hopefully see a turnaround in the club's growth. We could host evening matches, tournaments and training sessions, attracting more players and new members. It would also allow us to organise junior and adult coaching programmes at more convenient times, making the club more accessible and giving more opportunity for players to improve their skills, socialise and stay active, especially in the winter months where sporting opportunities are limited. It will also offer our coach the possibility to work all year round, and so this application has a positive impact to employment. Floodlights have always been something the tennis club have desired, but felt traditional metal column lighting would have been aesthetically insensitive to its location within the village. This application has been submitted with our neighbours and fellow villagers at the forefront of the tennis club's mind. A year before submitting the application, villagers were made aware of the tennis club's intentions of floodlights on the all-weather courts and welcomed questions and ideas. These have been taken on board before and since the application was submitted. This includes reducing the available hours of play from what was a latest cut-off time of 9:30 p.m. to 9:05 p.m. Monday to Friday, and now 7:05 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. Further mitigation includes a rubber visor to be added to the Tweena system and run the entire length down the west side of the courts. This will further help direct light down to the playing surface and significantly reduce light spillage to the east side of the courts. These mitigations and the Tweena system complies with the Institution of Lighting Professional Guidance Notes, which indicates for sites within rural areas, the illumination for surrounding premises should be a maximum value of 5 lux pre-curfew. The tennis club has been in the village for over 100 years. It's always had a good relationship with its neighbours, and it's not within our interests to ruin that. Although we've added mitigation to this application for the benefit of our neighbours, we of course will continue to work with them.
You have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. We'll continue to work with them should any unforeseen issues arise. A successful outcome today would allow for better likelihood of much needed grant funding to be available so the tennis club can look at improving and maintaining a safe facility. The tennis club is ultimately a facility for the village, and we wish to offer this all year round. I hope you can agree with the planning officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Hobson. Right. Put this out to Councillor Hopton, you indicated to speak.
Yeah.
Councillor, yeah, I'm going to say it should be Councillor
Yeah,
Needham.
thanks. It was very interesting to see this application and also listen to the comments there. Thank you for Councillor Cousins. It is a shame actually we couldn't let him speak today. He made a nice email earlier which makes some good points just to clarify the sort of difficult situation what you've got sometimes when neighbours and change and sporting facilities and whatever else. And living in a village where I do, where there is a thriving tennis club with 5 courts in the middle, you see, these things do light up, and they're there. But what you see is activity on a winter's evening. You see people keeping fit. You see the opportunity for school children when they finish school. In the winter it's dark at 4 o'clock, isn't it? So, there's an opportunity there. However, you don't see that people playing that late in the winter because it's cold, it's wet. For me, tennis is a game to either play indoors in the winter or play in the summer. But there are a lot of hardy souls who like playing outside, and good luck to them. And as a tennis parent of many, many years, I fully understand some of the issues brought forward there. But all I want to say is I can't see any reason to object to this. I think 9:05 turning the lights off during the week and 7:05 on a weekend. I've got that right answer on there. I can't see why there'd be any objection on that. Some people may be early to bed, but I think the lights going off at 9:05 is quite reasonable. I'm slightly surprised that they're not wanting to play a little bit later in some respects, because people are going to work. Say I know this is probably in the area of people working in York. By the time you get back, get going, have a game going, you're going to struggle to fit it in if you knocked it on the head any earlier than 9. So for me, I would recommend approval of this, and that's my I'm proposing approval of the scheme.
Yes, Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has caused interesting debate at Sutton-upon-Derwent Parish Council, because it's actually been quite an amiable discussion, and it was interesting, although I didn't actually take part, witness the proceedings at the meeting there, and it was interesting that the tennis club have made a lot of provisions for the amenity of residents with regard to the times of play. Interesting to say that you were referring to tennis not necessarily being played that late, but certainly as I drive by the tennis courts at South Cave, even in December, they are still being utilised. Very hardy souls in South Cave. Whether that will reflect in Sutton-on-Derwent, I do not know at this stage. But yes, so means have been taken by representatives of the tennis club at these meetings to try and appease any negativity there from residents. But one thing that does concern me here is with regard to the height of the fencing where the lighting is. Now, I know that we're told that a provision is made with the lighting to have like a rubber visor or hood to actually shield and direct the direction of the light or any light pollution that we may determine there. But I am concerned when we come to section 6.13, whereby we're talking that the external boundary fence is 2 meters high, and LED lighting would be just below 1 meter higher than the boundary fencing. And I'm just considering whether a condition could be imposed as to increase the height of the fencing so that it's actually higher than the perimeter lighting, and so therefore with the addition of the hood as well, the light would be directed onto the court and would be blocked out for neighbouring residents. So with that in mind, the other area that I think Mr. Fowler refers to is the fact that the information being used to make the decision on the lighting is purely by the manufacturer, and we don't have that actually confirmed as to whether this will be the lighting in situ at the tennis club here. So a couple of concerns there. If those could be addressed, I would be in mind to approve that if we could attach such conditions. Thank you.
Was you asked me, did you put your hand up, Councillor Meredith? I believe you did.
I did, yes, Chair. Just to say really that I completely understand Councillor Needham's perspective, and the balance is exactly what we hope to achieve in every planning decision. I think the phrasing officers always uses on balance, this is more or less impactful than that, for example. Now, my worry with the suggestion that Councillor Needham's brought forward is that a 3-metre fence would actually be overbearing 24/7, 365. And so I would actually consider that a more detrimental outcome. Just because a club has an ability to keep the lights on till 9 Monday to Friday and 7 or 5 past or whatever on weekends, doesn't mean that they will be doing that every day, all day, etc. But a fence is a permanent fixture. And so I'd actually, well, at least in my interpretation, and I believe that the fence would be worse overall for everyone involved. The simple truth is, and Councillor Hopson put it best, is that we do need to be supporting these groups. There's a number of reasons I won't go back over, but the fact is the club is 100 years old. Nobody's bought a house there and then seen a tennis club built next to them. If the tennis club was brand new and this was a slippery slope, I might look at it very differently. But objecting to a use that's been there for longer than anybody in the area's been alive makes it a lot more difficult for me to sympathise with an objector's frustrations, despite the fact the light, and let's be honest, tennis isn't a quiet sport either. It's not ideal, I understand, I sympathise with the objectors, but from a planning point of view, is what's being asked for an unacceptable level of detrimental impact? No, I don't think so.
Councillor Wilkinson, you put your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose when I first read this, my first thought at a village in outside with lights on, I vaguely recognised where it was, so I decided to have a look on the map to ensure that I was exactly where I thought it was, and I was concerned about a triple SI being nearby, and the species that are going to be affected by lights at night, especially if it's 9 o'clock. In the winter, it gets dark at 4. That means 5 hours of darkness. Bats, owls. I see that there was a habitat screening assessment done, which says that it's not going to have any effect on bats, and it's going to avoid most of the time when they're around. I'm quite surprised in the middle of the countryside like this that the village didn't say something about that. And I was even more disappointed that Natural England didn't think that it could make a comment, and that our conservation officers said there were no objections to anything, despite the effect that high intensity lights are going to have on local species flying around, especially at night trying to hunt, etc. So a little shocked that that wasn't brought into more effects. I don't think it's something that I would object to, but I am disappointed that we didn't have more comments about that. But I will be supporting the officer's recommendation. But as I said, it is disappointing to see, given just how much we try to protect these species, and yet we're allowing this.
Were you wishing to second Councillor Hopton's? Councillor Gill.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm really in favour of encouraging sport and exercise for all. I think we should encourage this in every way. I'm inclined to support this, and especially if we perhaps should have a condition where there's a digital mechanism that turns the lights off when there is actually no one playing, rather than have a timer that goes off at the closing time and nobody's on the pitch for 2 hours. Then we don't need extra lighting for no reason. So that was my suggestion.
Well, just my question to the officers is on the lighting, would this have to be switched on if nobody was there, or are these going to be on sensors, motion sensors?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've just been reading the supporting statement. Please be reminded the Twitter lighting will only turn on if a court has been booked. So if members are concerned about that particularly, we could possibly invite that. We could maybe roll it into, condition 2. So following hours and or when booked. I can do something about that. Just a couple of points as well, if I may. The fencing does cause real concern for me personally. To have an extended fence over 2 meters in proximity to any other neighbour, because we can't assume that all the neighbours would appreciate a 3 meter fence. Personally, it also they're not classified either as floodlights, because in lighting terms they're usually associated with on columns being extremely tall dispersal lightings, whereas the LED tweeners are more of a horizontal and lower dispersal, because that's where the lights are focused on the ground where the ball's going to be. So just to distinguish between the two, the floodlights is a particularly large space, and these are not.
Thank you, Keith. Yes, Councillor Cottages.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Councillor Meredith made some really strong points, so I won't reiterate those, but I'll just add that that while there's lots of residents, and I'm sure ward councillors here will agree, lots of residents in our wards think there's a lack of sport space, open space, sporting activity opportunities for residents. So I agree with Councillor Gill that we should be supporting that as far as possible, and especially as a cabinet member for sport, I think it's brilliant when the private sector can fill that gap rather than the taxpayer having to be burdened with it. And that's because private clubs like this one that's been around for 100 years are more sustainable. So it's usually more cost effective. And secondly, I'll just say that while we do have a shortage of, I'm sure you'll agree, Chairman, while we have a shortage of facilities like this in Goole, there are a few with similar lighting systems very close to residential properties, and I've never had a single complaint about the lights. That's probably because, like Councillor Meredith said, if you buy a house next to a facility like this that's been there for a long time, you expect some of those associated issues, I suppose. Also, just sorry to our committee manager. I have just seen the email. I have only just seen it though, so I'll have to declare an interest that I have seen the email from Councillor Cousins just now, which was sent at 12 o'clock today. That's why I hadn't seen it previously. But that's all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Sorry, if it hasn't been seconded, I'm happy to second Councillor Hopton.
Right, thank you. That's the second. Right, got Councillor. Yes, Councillor Needham.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, councillors are referring to the fact that the tennis club has been there for 100 years, but lighting has not been there for 100 years, so currently have not been played. So what we need to do is address the issue here, and the concern is with the lighting, not with the tennis club. There are no complaints about tennis in Sutton-under-Derwent at all. Everyone's very favourable of it. Members of the town, the parish council are also members of the tennis club, but the concern raised at those meetings has all been in relation to the lighting. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question is about these proposed the use of the rubber visors. What difference would that make as such in actually directing the light away from the residents' properties?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, the lighting is on the western and eastern perimeter of the court, so you can see the two courts there, and they're down the west and eastern side. So they're going to sort of go this way. And the supporting statements, the applicant did provide us with mitigation. I've got a photograph here. Should really have included it in the presentation, but basically it's a little visor lip that will sit on the lighting, which will have the effect of having some light dispersed to the ground, rather than it going completely horizontal.
Are we accepting the manufacturer's specifications on this, or have we actually done any of our own as such? Well, part of that was the one objection that these were the manufacturer's recommendations or their specifications. Have we actually looked into their specifications at all?
Yeah, I mean, we've had no reports to the contrary to what the applicant submitted. So if you look on page 104, Public Protection's response, haven't reviewed the technical report dated 20th of March, the design proposals, the tweener bars, each side of the court. Appendix 2 has the overspill of lighting on two courts, etc., etc., etc. I accept that the noise may increase as a result, and that the lighting cut-off operates, etc., and they've no objection. So we've based, Public Protection have based their assessment on the information provided. We've had no third party give us any other information to the contrary to say that those reports aren't accurate in that sense. And the visor lip, just to add, the condition isn't specific on the manufacturer. It just says the supporting statement that I have, which is also on public access, a rubber visor which will run the entire length. So I'm not particularly concerned about the specifics other than the diagram that I have, and also it's on public access for clarity.
Councillor Meredith, then
Oh,
we'll move
actually,
on.
Chair, well, you were looking at me, so I got in there first, but Councillor Robson did quick draw, so I'm happy to let him go first if you'd like to.
Did I miss your indication? My apologies.
Sorry, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Meredith. Just very sort of quickly, I mean, it seems to me that this is like a sort of a closed community here. I mean, everyone is close to everyone, and there's a parish council, etc. And everyone has to kind of rub along together, and has been doing so for the last 100 years by apparently. So consequently, all the little idiosyncrasies about when the lights are actually turned on and not turned on, or whether they're moved and whatever, can be sorted out amongst the community. We're here to say whether the lights should be there or not. I personally hate bright lights, but that's just me. I think that they don't have a big enough impact, from what I can see, to actually sort of refuse them. There again, there's the noise. I mean, I don't know whether it's still fashionable for tennis players to make loud grunting noises, but I should imagine that the fence would probably help to mitigate that again. So I'm leaning in favour of this one. I think the lights are a kind of necessary evil, and so I would go along with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Robson. I'm not sure whether they're grunt or not, but we'll move on from those personal events. Yes, Councillor Healy.
Yeah, thank you. So we are a community here, and obviously the ward councillors and councillor cousins have done a lot to facilitate dialogue, and I think that's important because it's the role of a ward councillor to do that. And yet again, we're in a situation where there's pluses and minuses on both sides, and we're having to sort of make a judgment. Officers are recommending approval, and I think that if you wanted to consider not doing this in terms of what is the impact, you have to find sound planning reasons. The officers have concluded that the proposal will provide is not considered to significantly impact on the character and appearance of the village, and the impact of the proposal on the amenities of the adjoining properties in regard to light and noise disturbance is considered on balance to be of a level that would outweigh the wider benefits. So clearly there is there is a sort of presumption in favour of approving this application, and if we want to take the contrary view, we have to find a very strong planning reason. So to take that contrary view, and I can't find a strong planning reason, because if I were to move refusal on the basis that I agree with the objector and the impact that it's going to have on their amenity, I think you'd be pushing me, or officers will be pushing me to find that reason. So that's where I'm coming from with it. I'm sort of thinking there are no real strong grounds for refusal.
Take one more question. That was from Councillor Meredith. Then we'll move to the vote because it's been on for getting on for over 2 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, just to say that I actually agree with a lot of what Councillor Cousins said in his email about trying to find a balance. And 9 o'clock to me standardises the use throughout the year. You can play tennis in the summer at 9 o'clock, and that would be possible because they're allowed to do it currently, and it would be doable because the light would allow you to play tennis without getting hit and other kinds of grunting. So ultimately, to me, they're not asking for anything they can't already do at some time. Just all the time, which to me is the balance between supporting the club and allowing it to function all year round or not. And so we're not being asked to impact people, but it's worth noting that planning permission doesn't give people the right to cause a nuisance. And so if this is approved, if there are any issues, then the council's public protection team can be approached by neighbours, by residents, and enforcement action can be explored down that route that may change the hours of operation as a result. So this isn't a closed door there. And so as long as that's been made clear, and Councillor Gill's suggestion, if possible, to Mr Thompson, that condition 2 be amended to say lights must be off by 9:05, 7:05, whatever it may be, and only in operation when the courts are in use. Provided that is added to condition 2, I think we've covered that off and found the balance that the ward councillor has spoken on behalf of, that we've all spoken on behalf of here, and that seems to me to be the fairest outcome. But if Mr Thompson's happy to give us a nod on that, tickety-boo. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So
should qualify, Chair, and Councillor Cottages has rightly pointed out, Mr Thompson said it's acceptable, but Councillor Hopton, as the proposer, would probably still need to agree so that I don't get shouted at by Jane.
are you happy to go with
Yeah,
those amendments to the?
What are we amending? Because I thought that's what we're approving.
The amendment to condition 2, Councillor Hopton, is that the lights must be off by 9:05 and 7:05 respectively, weekdays and weekends, but also specifically mentioned in condition 2 that the lights only be in operation when the court is in use as an addition.
You're happy with that? All right. Okay then, right. We've had Councillor Hopton has proposed that this for approval. Councillor Cottages has seconded it. So all those in favour of approval with the conditions set out in the report, plus the additional ones that Councillor Meredith has proposed, all in favour? That's motion's being carried. So I do apologise. Anybody against? And no. Are you against this, Councillor? I do apologise, Councillor Needham. That's one against. Any abstentions? Right, so just let you know that one has been recommended for approval with conditions set out in the report. Thank you very much indeed. We will now take a much needed comfort break. So if members of the public could just bear with us, please. Thank you. Right, councillors, if we can maybe return to your seats, please. Right, welcome back, everybody. Right, moving now on to agenda item number 9, Manor Farm Cottages, Main Street, North Dalton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is an application to install 6 replacement windows on part of Manor Farm Cottages, Main Street, North Dalton. You will recall, just as a matter of context, an application, I believe it came last year, might be wrong. I'm pretty sure it did, came to committee for 34 windows on these properties. And we refused them, and it was appealed and recently dismissed. But yeah, just as a way of context, that is similar to this in terms of its assessment. So it's recommended for refusal as set out in the report.
Thank you. Right, we did have a Mr. D. Thornton to speak, but he couldn't make it. So we have a Mr. Obias, I believe, to speak. Thank you. You put your microphone. I said 3 minutes, Mr. Obias, 30-second warning. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'd like to, my name is Oliver Bias, the owner of Manor Farm Cottages. They're our family farm. I live there with my parents and my immediate family. I have 2 points to make. One is a sort of planning issue regarding energy performance certificates, and the second is one regarding the street scene. So these cottages are in a state of disrepair at the moment, and the windows need replacing. They are unsightly. We have chosen to replace them with a heritage sliding sash window, which is specifically chosen for a conservation area. It's licensed for use in a conservation area. These cottages are not listed. The windows that we want to replace are the ones that face southwest, particularly badly weather damaged. And we feel that these heritage style sliding sash windows will fit in here very nicely and cannot be seen by anywhere else in the village, only by myself opposite. I live immediately behind these cottages. The other point that I wanted to make is that of the energy performance certificate. These have been upgraded on a program. They were all coal-fired, back-boiled, heated. They now have a ground source heat pumping system. But with this in place, they're still only energy performance certificate E. And so they need to get higher than that with a C. The government website recommends solid wall insulation and double glazing. I did get a quote on the 15th of March 2023 for a sliding sash Accoya window. They only got a quote for one single window at the back, 1.3 meters by 1.7 meters, and that cost was £5,328. So to do one cottage, that would be £32,000. Now, the government website says that replacing double glazing to get meter energy performance certificate C will save £110 per year. That's a replacement cost of 290 years money back for doing these
You
windows
have
in
30 seconds left.
hardwood acquire. We have the windows. They are PVC, but they have a wood effect grain. And if you hold them up to an Acquire hardwood window, as I've done so, they look identical. The point being is these Acquire windows are factory finished, and all you can see is the factory finished paint, and they look identical to a PVC window because you can't see the woodwork. So I'm appealing to you on street scene. I do not feel it would be
Mr.
affected.
Obias, sorry, so you've had. that's
No
20
one can
minutes.
see it. And as a landlord, I have a duty to improve the energy performance certificates of these cottages.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I was quite surprised that North Stone Parish Council are split on this decision, being in quite a rural area. I tend to go along with the officers on this one and refuse this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very brief. Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. If the council was 50-50 split, then surely the chairman would have had the casting vote. So that sounds a little bit strange to me. I'm afraid I disagree totally with Councillor Carey. I think that given the same circumstances, I would certainly want to put in the heritage windows, but I'll see what other people think.
Councillor Healy.
Yeah, I always take what conservation officers say very seriously, whether it's in a village like this, I think conservation village, or whether it's in an urban area like Beverley, because we are custodians of our villages. Whoever owns them, we are just here temporarily, really. And I don't know how old these cottages are, but they're pretty old, I guess. And somebody would tell me how old they are. May have missed it, but they've been here for centuries. And when a conservation officer says that the loss of traditional materials, which positively reinforce the character and appearance of the conservation area, resulting in harm to its significance, that concerns me. They're saying that it is noted from the drawings provided that the windows include details that are not characteristic of historic joinery, such as the mitered joints in the corner of the windows and the surface applied glazing bars. I mean, I do understand the points that have been made, that there's a cost to these windows. The applicants purchased the windows. It would be inconvenient not to put these windows in. But we are the custodians, and the conservation officers are the custodians as well. And they have our heritage as the East Riding and the rural East Riding and its unique character at heart when they make these recommendations. And much as it may seem harsh, that, on the face of it, you might look at this and think, well, is it a heritage window? Is it wood? Is it not? But overall, if these recommendations are not listened to, the cumulative effect of all of that is that our characteristic East Riding loses its distinctive character. So I am sort of minded. I listen to what people say, but I do have sympathy with the officers who are recommending refusal. I won't move that at this stage, but that's how I feel.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. Councillor Hopton, you wish to speak?
You had concur with Councillor Robson on the parish council being split. I always thought if it was split, the chair had the deciding vote, but there you go. I fully concur with what Councillor Healy's saying there. Whilst I think it's great that these properties are being renovated, brought in line with, you know, more modern standards, etc. They are part of the heritage, and I think, you know, definitely from being quoted here many a time in this room in the short couple of years that I've been a member of this committee. You know, we've got our experts within the council that invariably we should look to follow. I'm not a conservation expert, but I think if our conservation expert is recommending that we should be using traditional materials, and that's what the policy is, I'm struggling to go against what the policy is as much as I sort of empathise with the applicant today and what he's looking to do. So on that, I think I'd like to propose that we refuse the application in line with what the officers are saying. Oh, sorry, is he already? I'll second what Derek said. Sorry, I'll get my head in gear now. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. My apologies.
Councillor Wilkinson had his hand up earlier on as well. I'll come back to you, Councillor Robson. Okay, Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. It appears to me, I mean, because they've been changed a lot over their history, that these appear to be sort of late 18th century vernacular cottages. And if we can cast our mind back to say the sort of 1790s, which is probably around about that time, and there would have been the builder and his mate looking at the site, and they come up with two windows, and one window he says, and they look exactly the same, and one window he says, well, you know, that's not going to last very long, you know, that's going to rot away in like a few decades. But that one, he said, will last hundreds of years. Which one would you prefer? And also, well, that one will keep the house warmer as well. He would have chosen that one, wouldn't he? So this is sentiment, so far as I'm concerned, this whole thing around keeping the same materials. Yes, you can nowadays, you can keep the same appearance. You can keep you get conservation Velux windows, which are set in the roof and things like that. You get special conservation features that look exactly like the originals. I don't see a problem with that at all. And that's what the original builder would have chosen if he'd have had the chance. So I'm sorry, but I still would recommend that we approve this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wilkinson. No?
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I'm never predetermined on these things, I am predisposed to actually not have quite the aggressive attitude towards conservation as some people do. After all, if we were going to be very specific, then why the hell does it have flush toilets and electric light bulbs? Because when they were built, they didn't have that. Yet we allowed them to modernise and to move forward. And people will say, well, I tell you what, let's not worry about the inside, because we only need to look at the outside and the appearance that it has. Well, we've just heard these PVC windows look exactly the same as wood. And in fact, I put some in my house, and I know I ask anybody here to come and see which one's wood and which one isn't, because they're identical. As long as the conservation concerned, and these are supposedly ones that conservation people approve. I understand our conservation officer, so he's the expert, not me or she. And therefore, I'm not going to try to argue the point of what they're saying. I think that's their job, and they've done a very good job at what they're saying. But I have to look at it realistically. How far do we go with this conservation when the appearance looks exactly the same and doesn't have any impact whatsoever on people looking at it? Or do we not? Do we say, no, it has to be local materials? These local materials are going to be, it doesn't matter how much they cost, because that's not what we're here to discuss. But these local materials are not going to make any difference to the house. in terms of whether or not the PVC or not. You live in a damp house with freezing cold that you've got to put things on, because we're bothered about whether or not it's PVC or wood, even though you can't tell the difference. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm sorry, I don't agree with this, and I won't be voting for the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Cottages.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know what? I was on the fence until Councillor Robson spoke, and then I think Councillor Wilkinson helped, because on the one hand, we have to consider conservation areas serious. Now, we have one in Gore with a shop front, and we've seen some breaches of that recently, and it's a disgrace. So we have to take those seriously. But on the other hand, the applicant sounds like a good landlord, and in my personal view, there's fewer and fewer of those around nowadays, who is trying to benefit residents whilst delivering a scheme that's feasible to himself and being respectful of the zone. So I think on balance, and like I said, Councillor Robson, I think made a crucial point for me that swayed my view, that on balance, I think as long as officers agree and the conservation officer agrees that the UPVC replacement is similar or identical to what was required, then I'd support this.
Thank you. Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. Just can I ask for some clarity from the officers? Only some of the windows are to be replaced, is that correct?
Yes, there's a plan through you, Chairman. There's a site plan that will show 6 windows at the back. If we can just bring that up. Just here on the left, it's you've got the two middle cottages, and then you won't see the writing, but it tells you specifically what cottages are having replacements. So 6 windows. Just what I'm speaking. If members, just so it gets it under your heads over the next few minutes, if you are minded to support it, we really need public benefits, because that's the test. So less than substantial harm. There needs to be public benefits, not benefits acquired to a landlord financially or something like that. There needs to be public benefit. A public person needs to experience the benefits of this.
Well, I've already been shouted at once today, Chair, for putting words in other people's mouths, but on behalf of Councillor Coultish, I will ask the question, is no harm considered a benefit? And that's probably one for Keith to elaborate on in a second. For me, I know there was an original application for 32 windows or something, and it's now down to 6. And it's a difficult one because councillors Carey, Hopton and Healy pointed out that we are custodians of the conservation area, and anybody who owns a building in one is the custodian of that asset. And what I don't want to see is a slippery slope where it gets degraded slowly and we end up in a situation where a little bit taken here, a little bit compromised there, because that ruins the value of an area deemed worthy of conservation. On the other hand, an element of pragmatism is sensible as well, and exorbitant costs for a material that's not as thermally beneficial, that isn't as good for the residents, that's not as long lasting for the landlord. There is a balance to the decision. So the comments of councillors Robson, Wilkinson and Coultish also carry a lot of merit in my mind. Now, in a moment in time, as Councillor Wilkinson said, there's no difference between the UPVC and the wood, but the conservation area officer has stated that over time, the degradation, the weathering and the wearing will create a difference. And so for me, and I realise this is an awkward comment because officers have already said, don't do all 32, just do some. But for me, what I think is most important is consistency and seeing all the windows of the same material. So based on the comments of councillors Robson, Wilkinson and Coultish in that order, if we were looking at all UPVC of a character that would be aesthetically the same as what exists, I believe I'd be inclined to support it. But because we don't, in my mind, a mix match is the worst possible outcome, and an ageing in 2 separate ways that would make it obvious they were 2 separate materials, I believe I'm going to be inclined to support refusal of this application as it stands, not because I don't see the merits of improving the energy efficiency, improving the windows, improving the material with a longer life material, but as it stands on what's in front of us and what we're being asked to decide, I see a dividing of the 2 different types of material that will only exacerbate any issues to the harm of the conservation area. So I believe I'll be supporting the proposal to refuse.
You wanted to ask the officer something, Councillor Gold?
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to speak on behalf of Councillor Robson or Wilkinson, but to offer advice to them if they wish to take it. I think the public benefit would be that replacing them with UPVC would make the houses more sustainable, i.e. it allows the scheme to be affordable, which allows residents to continue to live there, continue to manage their energy bills, to meet standards that landlords have to abide by on energy ratings, i.e. C, which all of which make sure that they don't become derelict, and therefore that creates a worse situation. Is that acceptable?
Through you, Chairman, it's very, very tenuous. The buildings are holiday lets, so it's a commercial enterprise. They're not. My belief is that they're. My understanding is that there were holiday lets. Yeah, there has to be public benefits, and what you're saying there is purely, it sounds to me, purely a commercial benefit. Because we've got no evidence that the buildings are falling into rack and ruin, that they can't be used. I haven't seen any evidence to that effect. They're still being rented out. So yeah, I don't really see a public benefit there. Sorry.
Councillor Robson, been waiting patiently.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So far as public benefits go, I mean, obviously the public benefit is pretty obvious. It's going to improve the appearance of them. And that is for everyone. So it improves the amenity because it improves the appearance. If they're not going to be replaced, the windows are just rot away, which doesn't improve the appearance at all. A couple of other things. A lot of the brickwork on the buildings has been replaced in a non-uniform way, and we don't know when that was replaced, but that doesn't actually make the appearance of the terrace homogeneous. Added to which there are lots of television aerials, which I don't think are originally 18th century. So consequently, you can't actually say that it's, as Councillor Meredith suggested, that it's not going to be a homogeneous. It would ruin the homogeneous view of the building because of the fact that it ain't homogeneous anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Member.
Yeah, as I've already mentioned, you know, I think we go against conservation officers at our peril. But I'm also concerned that approving this is not going to be policy compliant, because the conclusion the officer's report is that the application is contrary to various paragraphs of the MPPF, and because there is no clear and convincing justification that's been provided for the harm, the application is also not considered to be in accordance with paragraph 213 of the MPPF. So if we do go against officers' recommendations and approve this, my worry is that it's not policy compliant, and there needs to be a very strong case made by those advocating approval for why we should go against planning policy, because planning policy here is saying that this is not compliant. And we all know that often sometimes when we're applying planning policy, it's looking to justify refusal or whatever. In this case, to approve this application will be going against policy compliance. So, for that reason, and for the fact that the conservation officer is there specifically to protect our built heritage, I think I'm coming down even more firmly on the side of refusing this application. I see it's a split decision, but I think I'll be sticking with that.
Right, last one, Councillor Robson. It's getting on a bit, and I think we've.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. After yourself, to be Councillor Cass, and then we'll
Sorry.
call it a day on that one.
Sorry, regarding listing, these are grade 2 listed. They're not grade 1 listed. We're treating a grade 2 listed building like it's a grade 1 listed building, where you have to have all the materials and everything the same. They're not listed. It says grade 2 listed in there. So, sorry, can I ask Keith Thompson if
Sorry, sorry, Councillor.
they're
Can
actually
can you just point me out in the report where it says they're listed? Can you just point out to me,
yeah,
please?
they said they're grade 2 listed,
Can you
but
just point out to me where it says that, please?
I might be wrong. I have been in the past before on the odd occasion. Now I'm lost. I mean, if they're not listed, even more so. I mean, we're treating buildings that are just in the conservation area as listed buildings. As I said, I don't think that carries much weight with me. Thank you.
Through you, Chairman, point of clarity, the buildings aren't listed. It's in a conservation area. The tests applied is the harm as a result of this proposal is less than substantial harm. Members have to be absolutely correct in their own resolution of any public benefits, and I haven't yet heard any public benefits. Just one last point. If the windows start to deteriorate in terms of appearance and their function, is it the owner's responsibility to keep them up to a satisfactory condition? If you keep letting certain materials in a building deteriorate and deteriorate, that is not a justification to allow, for example, plastic windows in this case. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Carey, and then we'll, I think we'll move on because we've got getting quite late at the moment. I think we've discussed, yeah, quite a lot. So it's Councillor Casson next, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I'd read it was grade 2 listed, but I'm corrected. Thank you. It's in keeping. I like the glazing for heat, etc. Listed buildings and in the conservation area near me, I have sash windows in my older building, and I use secondary glazing to keep the building warm and the rooms warm, and I find that quite satisfactory. So I will be voting for refusal, actually. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Has anybody, was anybody actually proposing? No, for to not go with officer recommendations. Anybody?
Sorry, Chair, so just point of clarity, we couldn't have two contradictory motions on the table at the same time, so we'd have to vote on that one, wouldn't we? I would say we couldn't even if we did.
Yeah.
We'd have to vote on Councillor Carey's proposal.
Yeah, we will, right. Right. So at the moment then, we've got Councillor Carey proposed that we go with officers' recommendations for refusal, and that was seconded by Councillor Hopton. All those in favour, raise your hands. Those against? Abstentions? Right, so that application is recommended for refusal, subject for the reasons set out in the report. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Please. Thank you.
For point of clarity, Chairman, it does say in the report there are some plastic windows in the village.
Right, councillors, moving on swiftly. The next one on the agenda is agenda item number 11, page 114.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application for the variation of condition 5 of planning permission 2303-144 PLF. In January 2024, we granted planning permission for the change of use and conversion of an existing integral garage for use as a hairdressing salon at number 3 Medler Drive in Brough. This application is to amend the hours of operation. The officer recommendation is approval, and there are no updates to the report as printed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, did we? Just a minute, councillor, you're not down to speak, councillor Gill.
But I have got residents that are waiting to hear me speak. I'm not
I'm
going
sorry,
to
councillor
speak
Gill,
because
but
you
you're not
told me I
down
cannot
to speak.
speak.
You will
I'm
not, you're not allowed to speak, please,
They're there.
please.
Saying that, can I just tell my residents why I am not allowed to speak?
Councillor Gill,
Please,
fill in
councillor
the
Gill, you should
form.
know better than this.
I did ask the officers to call it in.
Councillor Gill, I did explain earlier to you the reasons. Can you just leave this for out after this meeting, please? And we'll sort after the meeting.
I have asked to stay behind so we can discuss it. But
and
so you are not
we're not having a
eligible
fair
to speak.
hearing.
So would you please leave the chair, councillor? Thank you. Is there a Miss Gardner here today at all to speak? Oh, yeah. Would you come forward, please, Miss Gardner? You have 3 minutes and the 30-second warning. Thank you. Your microphone, sorry. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As stated in my application, the request for this amendment is to have flexible working hours to ensure that I can care for my 3 children whilst also working in the salon. 2 are in full-time education whilst my youngest is in a local preschool. The flexible working hours I've asked for will give me the flexibility during the holidays. With this, I can reduce my days working longer hours on the 2 days I've requested until 7 p.m. I also suffer with Crohn's disease, so when I need to rearrange my clients due to flare-ups, I have the flexibility to do so. I have sufficient parking on my premises to fit 3, if not 4 vehicles on. None of my clients park on the road down Medler Drive. I've always tried to keep this under control and have made it clear to all of my clients before the opening of my salon. I feel like I get the blame for extra cars down Medler Drive, as some neighbours obviously don't like me working from home. My direct neighbours have all supported the salon. I have also witnessed other properties down Medler Drive who are quite clearly undertaking work at home when one has external premises for this very purpose. I can also say that I'm unaware of any of my clients smoking on my premises, but again, I will keep this under control if needs be. I also can't see how it is a noisy salon, as my clients literally park outside, leave their cars and come straight in for their appointment. My salon is a very small business and I would like to thank the East Riding Council for taking the time to consider my application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Put this open to councillors. Anybody wishing to speak on this one? We've got.
I'll come in at the end, Chair, if
all right, councillor.
under the circumstances. Yep. Thank you.
All right, councillor Cottages.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Both ward councillors said they want to come in at the end, so I'll open it up. We have a lot of businesses like this in Gorn, and I do sympathise because in today's day and age, it's harder and harder for people to get by, especially people who are entrepreneurial and want to start their own business. So I support this kind of activity generally. Of course, we'll look at this application on its own merits. I do think the operating hours are a little bit late, to be honest. I think maybe it's a step too far, being is it 7 o'clock on some nights. I do think that's a little bit late. I put my daughter to bed about that time, so I can understand why it could be seen as a nuisance by some residents. That being said, I do have a lot of sympathy for the applicant, you know, as a parent, and my brother has Crohn's, so I understand that part of it as well. So I'm a little bit torn, probably siding on supporting it, but I'd like to listen to the debate, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yes, providing that none of the ward councillors want to jump in.
Oh, do you want to come in next, councillor Meredith? Then sorry, it's your ward.
Chair, thank you, councillor Wilkinson. I think councillor Coultish just put this perfectly. This is a really, really awkward one for us to decide because there's a sense to the applicant's desire to work from home, and it's completely understandable. Similarly, I can also see why there is frustration from neighbours because ultimately this is a cul-de-sac, this is a residential street. What's the term planning officers use? I wrote it down. It is a shared surface. There's no pavements. So it is a small, it's solely residential area, but furthermore, there is an industrial site 300 yards away. There is a commercially allocated area on Brough South, a third of a mile away. Ultimately, there is places to operate business premises from in the vicinity. I mean, you can see on the map there, that wouldn't affect the residential amenity of those next door. Now, residential amenity, truth be told, in this discussion doesn't actually matter. There's been 3 applications. The first 2 were refused, but the third was approved. And so the decision on whether it's acceptable to operate on from this premises has been decided. Therefore, that's out of our remit, out of the scope of what we can look at. The question, therefore, is what level of impact is acceptable and when is operating going to cause amenity issues? Now, a lot of people, stay-at-home parents, for example, retirees, whatever it may be, will be at home all day or perhaps from 3:30 after the school pickup. Some people do work from home, but again, there's a different measure. If you work from home as an accountant, let's say, and all you're doing is looking at books, you don't have any customers visiting, your impact on the community is a lot different from somebody who runs a business where customers need to be present, like a cafe, for example, where you can't get food unless you're there. And then, of course, there's smells associated with that use. So there's different degrees of impact depending on the business type as well. But planning policy is very general and the specificity isn't always there. So again, that makes this very difficult to interpret. Ultimately, for me, the line that would seem to make sense is that if you're operating in business hours, most people will be at work, and so you won't be impacting them. And that seems to be in line with what the council's decided. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's the position we're in. Anything beyond that, as Councillor Courtish said, is perhaps a step too far. So I'm going to keep my powder dry for the moment, but I must admit I do have concerns about this, specifically the 6 o'clock and doubly so the 7 o'clock. That does to me to be a bit beyond the ken, a step too far. And changing the hours of operation isn't something that's within our gift to sort. We've got to look at this black and white. Is that acceptable or is it not? I'm leaning towards saying not at the moment. It's just too much of an ask in a solely residential area. But very interested to hear what the rest of the committee say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gill, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I don't know, I think some of this is partly to do with previous applications for houses being approved in narrow cul-de-sacs with no pavement. At the time, where there was a policy of only having 1 car space per house. We're now trying to cram more things in. And I commend anyone starting a business from home. I did it myself. I started my business from home over 2 years. But not every home is suitable for commercial premises, especially if you get visiting vehicles. I've got feedback from residents, particularly I've got house numbers here that are more closer to the premises, and they're saying that when there is extra parking there is more of a restriction already. It's not easy to get in out of drives, and this is and they're obviously going to be concerned about this when, as Councillor Mayor has already pointed out, when people come home from their work or they're picking the kids up and they come back to there. So I mean, basically anything after 4 o'clock is going to be more problematic in these narrow streets. On homes observations, and I think we've all received photographs. We've seen the photographs on the officer's presentation. We've seen photographs, evidence of the contrary to what looks nice and peaceful and hardly any cars around. We've seen something onto the contrary. The property itself has so-called space for 3 cars, but on the photographs it shows us that the 3rd car is hanging over the curve in the bend and on the road. And this is partly coming from feedback from residents. There has been reports where there are 2 customers, then the 2 car parking spaces can be provided on the property, but that is at the expense of the residents, the operator, having to park the cars elsewhere. So there's a bit of a knock-on effect. Whilst they're complying with the parking for customers, that's fine, but It's not the, it's having a knock-on effect on the parking. So it's a difficult one. I appreciate there's some good service for this. It's a good service. Presumably, customers are getting the benefit of better value for money. In the cost of living crisis basis and things like that, we all need some help in that direction. So I mean, I certainly support that, but I think we need to probably debate the hours where it's not so late in the evening. I think there is potentially an extension in the morning at 9 o'clock till 10. Maybe that could be more acceptable, but there's one other issue as well, which I must mention that it has been sent to me, and we received it on the photographs, is the lighting at the entrance to the patio doors to the garage seems really excessive. It's almost like a commercial business. If it just had a sign there, it would be a commercial business, and it's not shown on the officers' photographs. It's some that we've received, and maybe should be some condition on that too. But I'll leave that for now, and I'll see what the rest of the debate takes us. Thank you.
Just before we go on, just let the planning officer come in on that one. Your microphone's still on as well, Councillor Gill. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unlike a normal planning application, when an applicant applies to vary a condition, you don't necessarily have to vary it to what they're asking for. It's within your gift to vary it to something different. So if your concern is that 7 o'clock's too late, but 6 o'clock is acceptable, you could impose a condition requiring the hours of use to be up until 6 p.m, for example, and then the applicant would have a right to appeal against that condition should they so choose. The advice of officers is that 7 o'clock in this location for this scale of business is acceptable, as is the revised start time of 9 a.m, given the small scale of the unit and the nature of the activities being one person working from home with 1 or 2 customers. Another option available to you would be to grant a temporary planning permission for the hours that the applicant is asking for, and over that temporary period, something like 12 months perhaps, we could assess the impact of that change and whether that will be acceptable permanently. And if it were operating successfully within those temporary extended hours, the applicant could apply to make those permanent in, say, 12 months. So there's a number of options available to you if the 7 o'clock is the concern. But obviously, Councillor Meredith hit the nail on the head. The business is consented, the hairdressing salon is approved, they can operate within their permitted hours. I understand there's been a breach of that on occasion. This application seeks to regularise that through consented hours, two days a week until 7 o'clock, 3 days a week, all weekdays until 6, with no weekend working or bank holidays. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, I think it was Councillor Robson had his hand up to speak, and then Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair.
I do apologise, Councillor Wilkinson. Please don't get upset.
I'll give it to Nigel.
It's very kind. I thought that's the last time I give up my role to the I've looked really carefully at these. I mean, one of the issues nowadays is that since COVID, lots of people have had agile working and been working from home. In fact, a third of this council works from home. So it's really difficult to actually turn around to someone and say that we don't like them working from home. The objectors on this, we have 7 supporters who have sent in information and very detailed stuff, and with no parking issues whatsoever seen, and 4 objectors, so the majority. And the 7 supporters are close neighbours next door and around them. So when it comes to the difficulties with, as we've seen, with some photographs that were circulated, we've no idea who those cars were owned by. It might be their neighbours themselves who had 3 cars each and couldn't park them on. As the applicant has said during the presentation, they have enough room for 2 cars on there with their own, and it's highly unlikely that a hairdresser, one person, will be cutting more than one person's hair at a time unless they're an octopus. So therefore, they'll have one in dealing with it and one waiting outside at worst. So we're really not going to have a problem with more than 2 cars. So I'm struggling to see what the highway issue is that we're looking at. So it certainly won't be a case. And in fact, our own highways officer says there's no issue. Therefore, if we're going to take our own expert's view, then let's leave it at that. As far as the actual spaces, etc., and other neighbours have friends attending their homes on an evening. You know, are we going to put restrictions on them? As far as I'm concerned, it's really difficult when someone is a small business trying to do something. That's fine. It's already been regularized. We know that that's the case, so we're not arguing that case. But it's a very small business indeed, and it's not going to increase the traffic more than an extra car here and there. And they're only within these times. We've mentioned about times. 7 p.m. isn't incredibly late. People are still coming back from home at that time. I certainly have been on regular basis. So I'm not 100% sure why that would cause an issue with anything. The officers have recommended approval. As far as I'm concerned, and have put some very good conditions to ensure that it's protected in the way that they feel appropriate. And I agree with them, and I am going to, if it hasn't already been moved, I'm going to move their recommendation for approval in line with officers' conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Sorry, was back to Councillor Robson.
Well, he's done it again. I mean, he said exactly what I was going to say, absolutely verbatim. There is nothing I can add to that apart from the fact I'll second it. I'll second approval.
I believe Councillor Healy wanted to speak as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and you, Anthony, you came in and answered the question, because I was going to ask you, can we suggest other hours, basically? And what was going through my head was maybe 9 till 5, that's something of that along those lines. But I think you make Councillor Wilkinson makes a valid point at the end of the day, and the highways officer makes the point in here as well, that the impact on the highway and the parking for one customer or whatever is going to be minimal, and people are coming in and out at such a time. And the more I think about that, the more I think, well, you know, penny pinching here a little bit to sort of say, well, you can go till 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock. They want to go till 7. I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference. The highways officer thinks it won't make a huge amount of difference. And officers are therefore recommending approval, and I think I'd be happy to go with that. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Hopton.
I'm tempted to say, yeah, I agree with him and him. Well, I have done now. I think the very valid point, which I'd thought of myself, was around the visitor perspective. You know, we do all have visitors to our homes. You know, this street is not ideal. You know, it's a legacy from 20 years or so ago when planning did allow for not enough parking down streets. There's no pavements, blah, blah, blah. But it is a small operation. We're not losing a residential property here. It's allowing, you know, what seems to be, you know, a lady who's wanting to run a business from home. You know, everything we do is some disturbance, but, you know, we're not having, you know, wild parties here all the time, or you know, things that are, you know, beyond the control of the planning department. We're maybe having, you know, a few extra visitors at different times of the day. Yeah, it's probably not ideal. It probably would be better in a different location, etc. But that's not in front of us. So the fact that we're not losing a house as such for a business, I'm struggling to object. So I'm going to go along with, yeah, him and him.
Right. Councillor Gill, and then we'll move on quickly because
Yeah,
pressing on. Then it'll be Councillor Medler.
Yeah. I think on reflection and hearing a number of comments so far, I think some sort of compromise could be reached. I mean, we have a situation where people feel, this is residents in Medler Drive, that a condition has been breached. There's been working after, there's been open after the agreed hours. Hence, we're here talking about a retrospective hours change. If these new proposed hours, once again, will they be adhered to? And obviously, if not, we have an awful lot of problem with enforcement and trying to get things changed. So could I propose that we do an extended hours, probably 9 till 5 on a temporary basis. Let's see how that performs over a period of time, 6 or 12 months or something, and then visit it back if the need isn't still a need to extend it further.
Councillor Cottages wanted to speak on this one, and then
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm just gonna, it's a wiggle on his point, sorry.
just because the chairman said I'm going to move on after that, and I'd already put my hand up.
Yeah,
before. I wanna
I'm
make
just,
sure I've not forgotten.
I'm just gonna wiggle on, yeah, sorry, Councillor Gill's point. Yeah, it was, I mentioned right at the start, didn't I, that I'd prefer shorter hours, and then I think Mr. Deavy made a good point that would have to be a really strong reason for deviating the proposed hours, which are clearly acceptable. It'd be difficult to find a strong enough planning reason defendable at appeal, not that that's a concern for this committee, enough to deviate them just a few hours, as Councillor Gill suggested. And I think Councillor Healy and others made a strong point that extra hour or those extra 2 hours for one customer at a time is going to make a very minimal difference. So for that reason, I've changed my mind and I wouldn't support altering the hours, and I'll be voting in line with officers' recommendations for those reasons.
Right, and finally, Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just trying to flick up. But what's the proposed opening hours? It's 6 3 times a week on the evening and 7. What's the start time? Is it 9 or 10? 9. So it's 10 at the moment. It's moving to 9. So what we've got is 9 till 6. So that's 9 hours 3 times a week. So that's 27 hours. And then we've got 9 till 7. So that's 10. So that's 47 hours a week. Right. Thank you. So I think I might have been a bit too reasonable in stimulating debate, because it went from no hands up to me talking to everyone's hands going up and all going the wrong way. So what I would say is I agree with Councillor Wilkinson on the highways point. It's not something that we can really control. It's not even an adopted street for that matter, to be fair. However, I would suggest Councillor Wilkinson must be more popular than me, because I don't have guests every night of the week. And so I'm doing something wrong, clearly. I'm too cantankerous. I need to make more friends. But actually, that sort of hit a note with me, and that made it clear the way I was feeling about it. That persuaded me. So let's be honest, officers have clearly gone back and forth on this application historically, and that's why it took 3 attempts for the first application to be approved, which was 6 hours a week. So that was 6 hours a day. So that's 30 hours a week. So what we're being asked to do here is almost double the amount of time the business can operate. That to me, well, yeah, well, I think as with the tennis court lights earlier, it's worth noting that just because it might not reach that, the potential is that it could reach that, and we have to act as though it would, to be fair. And so the point I'd make, sorry?
So I think Di just wanted to clarify something on the legal side, which will maybe help with some conclusions. Thank you.
No, I actually didn't want to clarify anything on the legal side. I'm just concerned that we've been running for such a long time now, and people have been here a very long time, including the applicant. Sorry, yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to actually make any legal points or anything other than what's been said by the officers already, but I'm very concerned that this committee has been running for over 3 hours now, and the applicant herself has been sitting here for that length of time, waiting for a resolution.
Yeah.
No, do you mind, Chair?
Just let Councillor Meredith finish.
At council where job and knock, we go in when the job is done, and I will not support anybody trying to rush through a process simply because somebody wasn't lucky enough to be at the top of an agenda. If someone's put in the time and paid for a service, the least we can do is take their application seriously and consider it as serious as any other application. So I will be finishing my point with your blessing, Mr. Chairman. With that in mind, what I would suggest is that if there has been 3 attempts to get a planning approval on this site and only the 3rd one was done, then planning officers previously found a balance. Therefore, that measure was established of what was acceptable in terms of impacts on residential amenity. And they wouldn't have gone to that degree of attention to detail if it wasn't a contentious and inflammatory topic. So my conclusion, therefore, is going from 30 hours a week to 47 represents an overly significant impact on residential amenity. Councillor Cottages is a one-year-old child. He puts her to bed at 7 o'clock at night. I don't think he'd be grateful if there was businesses operating on his street at the exact same time he was trying to get his daughter to bed. Well, the point I'm trying to make, Mr. Chairman, is that if this is a success story, if the business has grown to such a degree, they need to have the permission to operate for 47 hours a week. They should be in commercial premises, operating as a commercial enterprise. They've done so well that they've got a full-time job. That is beyond what I believe is acceptable in a residential area. And so, whilst I have a lot of sympathy for the applicant because of the personal circumstances and raising a family, etc., we already had that on 3 other applications today where it was pointed out that those are the things, like the poor lady whose father needed to be in a lodge. We can't take account of that. We have to just look at the planning material reasons for a decision. And for me, 47 hours is too much. So if we can't see the hours reduced and limited on a temporary condition as suggested by Mr. Deavy and as pointed out by Councillor Cortish isn't really viable, I'm left with no choice but to suggest to the applicant they go away and try again with something a bit more balanced, because 47 hours is an awful lot of time on a small residential street, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anthony, you wanted to come in on this, you said.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 2 previous applications, I should clarify, were only refused on highways grounds because of inadequate parking shown on the plans. There was no issue with nuisance or disturbance to the neighbours or the principle of the business. That was all acceptable. It was just highways grounds. The plans did not show space for 3 vehicles to park, which is what highways required at the time. They managed to convince us on their 3rd attempt that they could get 3 vehicles on the frontage, and then that 3rd application was approved. In terms of the hours of operation, you're talking about this one person who is resident at the property working from home. She's asking for flexible hours to allow her to work within those consented times. The likelihood of her having a customer come in at 9 o'clock, a back-to-back appointments till a customer leaves at 7 o'clock is unrealistic to suggest. I would suggest that that's an unrealistic position to take. She's asking to be able to work later into the evening to fit around whilst the condition would technically allow it, this is one person working from home. I don't think that realistically you're going to have customers come in and go in for 11 hours a day or 10 hours a day, whatever you said it was. It would be it would be possible. I think it's unlikely that would happen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Councillor Wilkinson.
Right, I'll be very quick because I'm conscious of the amount of time. Whilst I love listening to my esteemed friend at the end, I have to say that he's a little bit out with the 47 hours. No one's going to not have it's 5 hours for lunches during that period. They're going to have tea breaks. There's not going to be someone there all the time. I know he's using it as an example, but, come on. It's not really that. But thank you.
Right, councillors, I think we should move to the vote. The only proposal we've had is for approval from Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Robson.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry?
I did put a proposal about the compromise hours. Is that not acceptable? I've not got a seconder for that.
Well, nobody seconded it. Here. Right, move on to the vote then. So it's to vote on approving officers' recommendations with the conditions set out in the report. All those in favour, show please. Those against? Any Any abstentions? No. Right. That has been approved with the conditions set out in the approval of the officers' conditions. Thank you very much.
No, got appeals to go, yeah.
Hey?
You've got appeals to go.
Yeah. Right, we have one more planning agenda item number 7, page 90.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is an outline application for residential development, all matters reserved on land just to the north of 44 Westfield Road, Market Wheaton. You will recall this is before you last meeting, and there was discussions about the numbers and about the plans and what they showed and what they didn't show. So those have been stripped off this application. It's purely a red edge, and it's residential development, and the recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Keith. Right, yes, Councillor Cottages.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank officers for and the applicant for listening to members, and I'll recommend propose approval in line with the officers' recommendations.
I'll just second that proposal.
I just feel it's appropriate, since I was the one who was most cantankerous about this last time. I was very frustrated to see the term "all matters reserved" and the phrasing "two properties" in the title. That was a circle that didn't square for me, so I'm very glad to see that it's now something that is sensible without predetermining or binding us or being able to use against us as a council at any future applications.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. Based on the fact that on that side of the road, there's no consistent building line, which there is on the other side of the road, and it's within the development boundary, I see that it's hard to refuse. So I will go along with approval of that.
Right. Okay, on this one then, anybody else got to say? We'll just go straight to the vote then. To recommend officer approval with conditions set out in the report. That was proposed by Councillor Cottages, seconded by Councillor Meredith. All those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? No. Right, so that is approved. Thank you very much indeed on that one. And now we will move on to the, where's it gone? Where are we? Planning appeals, do apologise. It's been a long day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to planning appeals, Appeal 12A on page 153. This was a retrospective development for security gates with associated works to the highway access at 13 On Hill in Swanland. If you know On Hill in Swanland, it's quite a verdant street scene, either hedgerow planting to the boundaries or low level, open or low level kind of boundary treatments. This was a security gate that had been erected in the immediately adjacent to the highway, partly within the service strip. We refused the retrospective application. The applicant appealed that decision on the basis that it was required for the security of his property and his human rights were affected, etc. Consistent with the decision further up the road at the head of the cul-de-sac, the inspector took the view that the impact on the street scene was not acceptable and dismissed the appeal. So a good outcome. We're now working with planning enforcement and the applicant to try and find a solution, either moving the gates back out of the highway, in which case they might be permitted development, or reducing the height to a more acceptable height. Thank you, Chairman.
Item 12B, this was an application just recently discussed at a planning hearing. So it's an equestrian site down in Blacktop. They had permission for a temporary temporary caravan to live on the site to support the business, and now they've come on with bricks and mortar. A couple of interesting points that officers often face. One is the size of the dwelling. So how big can a house be for an essential worker? What are the parameters? How many bedrooms should they have? How many bathrooms should they have? So it's all discussed in this report. It's actually really, really good for members if you have the time to read it. There are some benchmarks that we follow with advice from rural estates. And then the second issue is about how the building of the house is funded, because it should be funded by the enterprise. The money should come from the enterprise and not from mummy and daddy, as was the case here. So appeal dismissed, good result. Any questions? Item 12C, this was another interesting one. This is a certificate of lawfulness. So the applicants have made a case that their site works and operates as a waste recycling site. quite a good debate on the definition and what exactly a waste recycling use is. What does it comprise? B1, B2, B8, mixture of all, sui generis. So quite an interesting one. Obviously, they lost at appeal, but the case officer and legal really put up a robust defence in terms of what they wanted, and the inspector seen through it effectively. Item 12D, you'll recall this one. Unfortunately, we lost the appeal. We did put up a fight to try and safeguard members' resolution based on impact on the character of the conservation area. Now, the inspector does, similar to ourselves, suggest that there is low level of harm, so less than substantial harm, but that was very specific to this part of the conservation area, not wide reaching. Primarily because of the tall stone wall that's on the site, but also how it relates to the rest of the village. So unfortunately, the appeal was allowed with conditions. They also went for costs on that. They believe that their case was that everyone here at the time acted unreasonably. You came to a different view from officers. Now we know ourselves in planning and also PINs that's not usually a reason to be given applicants or appellants costs. So you're entitled, provided you come to a rationalised decision, obviously with our support, that we should be okay with costs in this case. Finally, 12E, this was the signage down in Station Hotel. So it's currently a barber's, quite a chunky looking sign. Okay, I thought I had a photo, but yeah, really awkward looking sign that we refused, and the inspectors agreed with us on that. Basically, an impact on the street scene and how it appears. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Keith. Yeah, well, thanks very much again, councillors, for a very healthy measured debates again, as usual. But thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.